Under the measure, if ByteDance does not divest from TikTok within 6 months of enactment, the app will be prohibited in the U.S. The measure heads to the Senate next. The judge overseeing the Georgia racketeering case against Donald Trump and his allies has quashed some charges relating to soliciting officials to violate their oaths of office. Fulton County Superior Court Judge Scott McAfee declared that 6 of the counts in the original indictment should be removed, though other charges, including racketeering, remain. President Biden heads to the battleground state of Wisconsin today, where he'll announce billions of dollars worth of grants. NPR's Franco Ordonez has more.
In Milwaukee, President Biden will unveil a $36 million plan to help reconnect communities divided by the 1960s construction of I-94 that led to the demolition of roughly 17,000 homes. Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg said the funding is part of Biden's efforts to address the economic harm and racial disparities caused by highway systems often built through predominantly minority neighborhoods.
The people who made those decisions in the past are, for the most part, not even around today. And no one here today is responsible for having first created that situation. But all of us are responsible for what we do next.
The visit is part of a series of trips to swing states that the president is making following his State of the Union address. Franco Ordonez, NPR News.
Russian President Vladimir Putin is warning the West that Russia's nuclear forces stand at the ready. Putin's comments came days before Russia's weekend presidential elections. NPR's Charles Maines reports.
Putin's latest round of nuclear saber-rattling came couched in reassurances for the Russian voting public. In a lengthy televised interview, Putin said he didn't see a rush towards nuclear confrontation with the U.S., but noted Russia's nuclear arsenal was on standby should the existence of the state come under threat. Weapons exist in order to use them, Putin said, adding, "We have our own principles." The Kremlin leader has repeatedly warned the U.S.'s deepening military support for Ukraine risked a catastrophic war between nuclear superpowers. Critics have called the threats tantamount to nuclear blackmail in order to secure Russian control over its neighbor. Charles Maines, NPR News, Moscow.
Wall Street, the Dow is up 139 points. This is NPR News.
Good morning. With the latest from the GBH Newsroom, I'm Henry Santoro. Massachusetts Governor Maura Healey has pardoned residents convicted of simple marijuana possession before it was legal here in the Bay State. Healey made the announcement just a short time ago, but it still needs approval from the Governor's Council. Patty DeJunes is a parole lawyer in Boston. She says this move could help tens of thousands of people.
Greater opportunity for housing because people won't be prevented from renting due to a criminal conviction. People will have employment opportunities that they've not had before for the same reason. And I think that losing the stigma of the conviction also is important and will help people get back on their feet.
The pardon would fulfill a promise that Healey made while on the campaign trail. Today is the 8th day of picketing at the Massachusetts Museum of Contemporary Art in Western Mass, Mass MoCA as it's called, and earlier this week, a 20-foot-tall inflatable Scabby the Rat was seen hovering over the Union strikers. The Berkshire Eagle reports that negotiations between the museum and Union are at a standstill right now as unsuccessful bargaining continues between the two. At issue is a $1 difference between the two proposals and a 1% difference in overall salary increase. After getting paid this week, museum officials say the union members will stop getting paid. In sports, professional women's hockey, Boston at Minnesota tonight. Exhibition baseball, Red Sox play the Yankees at Steinbrenner Field in Tampa today. Beautiful day in the neighborhood, mostly sunny, mid-50s. We're at 47 right now. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Jones Day, an integrated partnership collaboratively providing legal services for more than a century. 42 offices, 5 continents, serving clients as one firm worldwide. Learn more at jonesday.com.
Jim Browdy. I am Marjorie Egan. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH. We are broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library, as we do now every Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday. Streaming at youtube.com/GBH News and facebook.com/GBH News. On Friday, we're going to be back here with Broadway legend Patti LuPone. She zooms in, as well as players from the Tony Award-winning show, Girl from the North Country, a musical written about the songs of Bob Dylan, which is supposed to be just
We're going
fantastic,
tonight.
And we're going
And
tonight.
by the way, Patti LuPone, for those that don't remember, was the first Evita ever. I mean, she is spectacular. I'm really excited. Later in today's show, special live music on a Wednesday from the husband and wife co-owners of Davis Square's The Burn and Lindsay O'Donovan, ahead of a special St. Patrick's Day show in the spirit of the late, great Brian O'Donovan. We'll start today talking about this bombshell report from the Greater Boston Chamber of Commerce Foundation that used the word alarming to describe the following statistic. 25% of 20-somethings living in Greater Boston plan on leaving in the next 5 years. Worse stats for LGBTQ people and women of color. In a couple of moments, we'll open the phone lines and text lines at 877-301-8970 to get your thoughts on the survey. But first, we are joined on Zoom by Jim Rooney, who's the president and CEO of the Greater Boston Chamber of Commerce. How are you, Jim? It's good to see you.
Hi, Jim. Hi, Marjorie.
Hey, thank you very, very much for joining us, Jim Rooney. So why are these people leaving? Why are these young people leaving?
Well, the number one reason they told us that they are thinking about leaving is because of housing prices and the cost of rent. Those flew off of the chart after we took a look at the results. There's other reasons like mobility and transportation issues, but cost around housing is number one.
You know, this may be obvious, but answer an obvious question anyway. Why should this matter? Why do we care if young people choose to spend the bulk of their lives not here?
Well, from a business community perspective, that's our future workforce and future leaders of companies and businesses and future entrepreneurs in our community. We did this because if you look at census data over the last 3 years, 122,000 people have left Massachusetts, and the largest cohort of them are young people. So we wanted to know what are people that are here thinking, and they're still thinking about leaving and going to other states. So, we can't afford to continue to lose population and have the kind of economy and quality of life that we want.
Can you also define, I should have asked you at this beginning, Jim Rooney, what is Greater Boston in this survey? What does that encompass?
Well, it's basically eastern Massachusetts, not down to Cape Cod, but Suffolk County, Middlesex County, Essex County, Plymouth County.
So this, as you point out the Greater Chamber points out in their survey, that this has happened a lot, where people come here, they get their education, they go someplace else. But you mentioned the 122,000 people leaving before. I assume this is a much bigger number than we usually have, this 25% wanting to get out of Dodge.
Well, when you take a look at the total survey, the positive side says that 38% are very likely to stay. What concerns me is the big middle of people that, are going to make a decision along the way. They're likely to stay, but not sure. They're likely to leave, but not sure. And that will depend on how things unfold in the coming years, how we deal with the housing crisis, how we deal with the transportation crisis, how we deal with the cost of living here. So there's a big cohort, if you think about it, of 50 or 60% that can be influenced in terms of whether they stay or not.
By the way, you are a really positive guy, my friend. When you cite 38% saying they're staying, that's a pretty thin read of positivity. We had Mayor Wu on yesterday, right after the piece in the Globe appeared about this, and I assume you'd agree that both Governor Healy and Mayor Wu are addressing or attempting to address the exact problems your survey identifies as driving young people out of the state. So it seems, assuming you agree with that, Jim Rooney, I assume the issue is whether they can act fast enough. Are you convinced that the mayor and the governor can get their programs in place and in effect quick enough to stem this outflow?
Well, again, that's one of the reasons why we're putting this out there, is we're trying to elevate the urgency of the issue. The governor has a housing bond bill pending before the legislature. It's a short session, ends in July this year. We got to get after that. We got to get this construction, this production going. Some quick data points: between 1960 and 1980, we were averaging 30,000 new housing units per year in Massachusetts. We're down a half of that.
Yeah.
We're just not keeping up with the economic growth and the population needs that we have. We have to produce housing. So, the governor's housing bond bill has to be dealt with urgency.
Well, the thing is, it seems to me, and this is just anecdotal, my driving a lot around Boston, is that we've been producing housing like crazy around in Boston. It's all, high-end housing. You for like $4,000, $5,000, $6,000 a month, and the same thing with houses now. You look at the average price. It seems like the only people who can afford to stay here are people that are making astronomical amounts of money, or people that lived in their parents' basement for like 10 years so they can save up enough for down payment. You can't afford anything right now.
Well, I think that's a supply and demand issue. One of the reasons why you can't afford and why it's so expensive is we're not making enough.
Yeah.
And that's simple market economics. We're just not producing enough units. So with the demand so high, the prices are going to be so high. We learned that, in freshman year of college.
I missed that class, Jim, but I'm sure it was great. Hey, Jim Rooney, I have two last things. As I mentioned in the introduction, LGBTQ young people and young black women are the most likely to say they're leaving. Did you get any insight from the survey as to why?
Well, what was interesting in the survey is people said that finding their community, networking, building relationships is very important to them in where they choose to live. Starting their career and what type of career came in fourth place. So those more intangible issues, finding my community kind of stuck out to me.
Last thing from me, you gave me a huge opening to recruit you for one of my many pet causes, Jim Rooney. You used the word, it's a short legislative session. Can I propose something radical and urge you to join the crusade? I think people listen to the show know that I talk about the fact that the legislature takes a mere 5 months vacation in an election year. Do you think they should maybe stick around a little longer this year to make sure they address T financing, the housing bond bill, and those sort of things? What do you think, Jim Rooney?
Jim, if they get it done by July, I'll give them the rest of the year off.
And if they don't?
You're assuming that nothing gets done in those 5 months when the reality is there's a lot that gets done. I'm not going to take that one on.
I didn't think you would.
Hey, one last thing for me, though. It seems to me that we haven't planned, because what we built is expensive housing. I mean, if I missed it...
You tried that one already.
Yeah, I know, but every building I see is rich people housing. And there's been a lot of cranes around Boston for at least 10 years.
If you look in Boston, that has been the dynamics of the cost of construction. You have to make them pencil out. You have to recover certain amounts. But let me just give you a point. In the governor's bond bill, there is bringing back on the rolls 10,000 plus public housing units that are empty just sitting there because they haven't been maintained and updated. There's no zoning issues. There's nothing to do other than fix them, and there will be 10,000 units for low-income people in the Commonwealth that get created, and I would say within 2 years.
Within 2 years.
Jim, we really appreciate your time. By the way, I'm going to text you a week before the end of the legislative session, and we'll see how we're doing, okay?
Okay.
All right. Sounds like a deal.
Good to see you, Jim Rooney. Thanks.
Thank you very much for being with us. Really appreciate it. We've been speaking with Jim Rooney, who's president and CEO of the Greater Boston Chamber of Commerce. We really appreciate his time. And as we know, the governor's bond bill is now sitting up with the legislature, right?
No, but Jim Rooney says they do a lot of things. Let's see if they get it done before they leave for the year in July. We're going to take a break.
Okay, we're going to take a break, but we were talking about the impossibility of buying something or renting something that's affordable around here, and this really upsetting survey by the chamber that says that up to 25% of young people 20 to 30 are planning on getting out of town, mainly because of housing, also because the T doesn't work, and I guess they can't build their community. It's a sad situation. 877-381-8970 is the number. You're listening to the Boston Public Radio, broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News and facebook.com/GBH News.
I'm Marco Werman. We're living through history, and the world's newsroom has the first draft.
If journalists leave a scene, it becomes a black hole. Then the world doesn't find out what's happening. And when the world doesn't know what's happening, human sympathy also evaporates.
Looking for answers and making sense of global events as they happen. Join us on The World.
This afternoon at 3, here on GBH News 89.7.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you.
And Comcast Business, committed to keeping businesses up and running with Comcast Business Internet, with internet speeds up to 10 gigs available. Comcast Business, powering possibilities. And Johnson & Wales University. From faculty mentors to research and internships, JWU helps students explore their passions through an immersive approach to education. You can discover more at jwu.edu.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Marjorie Egan. We're live at the library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News, facebook.com/GBH News. When we return on Friday, we will have 4 performers from the Tony-winning show Girl from the North Country. It's now in town. It's all the songs of Bob Dylan weaved into this thing. Marjorie and I are actually going to see it tonight. And we have special live great Irish music for you at the end of the noon hour today, which is fabulous. If you're just joining us, we're talking about the Greater Boston Chamber of Commerce Foundation's report indicating Greater Boston could lose a quarter of 20 to 30-year-olds over the course of the next 5 years. We just spoke to Jim Roney, who runs the chamber. Now it's your turn. 877-301-8970. If you're in that age bracket or close enough, are you considering a move elsewhere? Why? If you're thinking of sticking around, staying in Greater Boston, what's that about? What were the motivating factors there? And if you're beyond the 30-year-old mark, we want to hear from you specifically. What has kept you around? 877-301-8970. And do you have faith in Mayor Wu, Governor Healy, and the legislature moving quickly enough on issues like housing and transportation to get a lot of these 20 to 30-year-olds to flip their decision? 877-301-8970 is the number.
Listen to this. Our 2 30-something kids and their spouses work in public service and for nonprofits. They can't afford to live here. Actually, one couple has left the country. Every metro area in the U.S. is suffering from housing that is treated like an investment for vulture capitalists and is creating a drain of young people, and that is not contributing to our communities. You know, that's another thing. People, these companies that are buying up these houses and turning them over really, really quickly, or buying condos as kind of like investments and no one's even living in them. And the fact, we were just talking about this with Jim Rooney, like I said, in Boston at least, what you've seen is multi-million-dollar housing being built, condos being built that are really, really expensive, or apartments like that place, Continuum over by the Harvard Stadium. People are paying like $6,000 a month for a 3-bedroom in there.
Yeah, you tried that on Jim Rooney 3 times.
Well, I know.
But the public housing answer is a good answer. And if they pass her $4 billion bond bill, there's a lot of affordable housing money in there as well.
Yeah, but
I think
the big problem in this city is that we have not created affordable housing.
I agree.
Created housing for people. Okay.
Enough.
But
the good news is we have 2 people. Partially good news. You have a governor and a mayor. Even if you didn't vote for either or both of them, would you not agree they're totally committed as individuals on the issues that appear to be the exodus issues for young people?
Women, by the way. Tom from Norwood, thank you for calling.
Thank you, appreciate it. Tom from Norwood, hello.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Sure.
I've had friends over the last 20, 30 years that have moved to Virginia or North Carolina, and they regret it because the property values don't go up as much. The pay doesn't go up as much. They miss the culture of Boston.
Yeah, you got to live in North Carolina if you go there. Exactly.
Yeah, and they're always itching to get back for family reasons, for pay, for jobs, education. And it's a short-sighted thing to move somewhere cheaper for the short term. It's one thing if you're going to move somewhere if you're retired, but it makes sense to to work in an expensive area and retire in a cheap area. That's the way it works.
Yeah, but Tom, while I agree with every word you said, the one thing you left out is it makes sense to have the long view rather than the short view, unless you can't afford the short view. If you literally can't afford to live here, you can't afford to own a car and park it, so you have to rely on the T, which is totally unreliable, despite so far the best efforts of Philip Eng. So it's really, I mean, it's a bottom line issue for the most part, don't you think?
Yeah, I get it. If you're starving to death, I get it. You got to move. But if you want to buy a BMW M3 and live in Virginia, then that's your prerogative.
We're with you.
Prerogative.
We're with you.
Yeah.
We're with you. It's a good call, Tom. Thank you. Appreciate it.
But the thing is, if a condo costs $600,000, you got to come up with $60,000 for a down payment. That's a lot of money.
I repeat, there's a $4 billion bond bill that Maura Healey talks about night and day, that if the legislature can see fit to actually act,
well, that's a big
before
if.
it goes, I tell you, they go on a 5 months vacation.
That's a big if.
In election. Do you believe that people are okay with this? We used to ask Charlie Baker about this all the time. He was fine with it. I can't remember why. I think I shouldn't speak for. I think we've asked Governor Healey about it. I mean, it's obscene. There are big problems in this state. They're accentuated by this survey, and they should stick around until they solve the damn things. No?
I think it's a big, huge problem for everybody, and the T is a big, huge problem for everybody too. Zeno in Boxborough, thank you for calling.
Hey, Zeno.
Hi, how's it going?
Excellent.
Thanks.
What's going on?
Oh, well, I guess I wanted to comment because I'm a 25-year-old and I'm actually a fencing coach in the greater Boston area. So I guess I'm the target demographic age, but
you are.
I'm not making the tech sector money, so to say.
So what are you going to do about it? What are you going to do about it? Can you stay? Will you stay?
Well, that's a good point. I'm staying here mostly because my family's here, in the area. And but the interesting thing that I wanted to bring up is, I work with kids in the Boston area all day, and it's pretty insane to see just what the goals and aspirations of these kids are and how much money they have to do that. Obviously, when you think of fencing, it's a pretty, posh sport. But, the kids, their dreams are to go to Harvard, Yale, this and that. And none of them ever think about staying in the area or doing that. They just want to go where the money is. And frankly, after Harvard and after MIT, most of them are going to go somewhere else because they hate this state. They hate
Wait a second. Why do they hate this? What do they hate about? How old are these kids you're giving fencing lessons to, Zeno?
I mean, this is the crazy thing. These kids are anywhere between 9 and 18.
And 9-year-olds hate the state?
They do. It's the talk of the fourth grade, let me tell you. They can't wait to get out.
What do they hate in particular, Zeno?
This is the crazy thing. These kids are smarter than you and I can ever imagine, so they know just about everything. It's not just Fortnite. They're also talking about the governor. They're talking about the TV. And then they're also talking about the war in Israel.
Wow.
So Zeno, where do they want to go? Where's their destination?
Oh,
the Cayman Islands.
Harvard,
That's what.
Princeton or Columbia.
Okay.
Well, Zeno, you're sticking around, right?
Yep, I am. I'm sticking around just for now.
Well,
for now. I like it here.
Drop the for now. Let's say you're sticking around. Get back to us in a year and let us know how it's going. Zeno, thanks for the call. We appreciate it.
Beth from Newton makes a great point, too. You
What's
hear
that?
this a lot from realtors. We need more affordable options for downsizing seniors. If I sell my house, I would, she says, sell my house if there was some place to move.
Can I say two words to you?
What?
Granny flats.
Granny flats.
And excuse me, what legislation are granny flats being built as of right without local zoning obstacles? It's in the $4 billion
housing.
Exactly.
Bill,
900 up to 900 square feet. You can build them anywhere you want, and local zoning can't stand in the way.
But that's one of the big things you hear, that somebody bought a house. Maybe they bought the house for $400,000 or $300,000, and now it's worth like $1.5 million. And they are older now. Their kids have grown. They want to sell it, but when they look at where they can go, there's not that many places that they can go because everything is like $7, $8, $9, $1 million.
Didn't you say one of your kids has plans to put you in the garage? Didn't you tell me that? Or something like the garage. You said which is
That's
fine,
right.
as long as it's got a bathroom and a desk and a phone.
The granny flat is where I'm going.
Yeah.
It absolutely is where I'm going, because you can't afford anything else.
No, but in all seriousness, that is an affordable thing. Most people of a certain age are on a fixed income. They can't afford, nor do they need a lot of space. These granny flats, as they're called, are huge. It's a huge thing. And by the way, to Healy's credit, by including this as an as-of-right thing, they're basically challenging local governments, saying we're overriding your ability to stop this, which is a bold thing. The question is, will the legislators have the courage to do it? I would say probably not. I hope I'm wrong.
And that's one of the supply and demand issues that Jim Rooney was talking about it, and that Benjamin Brighton is pointing out to me, that it's a big supply is the problem, and it's true, supply is the problem. Let's go to Kenyana in Hyde Park. Kayana, sorry, in Hyde Park.
Hey, Kayana. Hey.
Hi, good morning. I'm a longtime listener, first-time caller.
Thank you so much.
And you're welcome. So I'm a first-time homeowner in Hyde Park. I came to Boston in '98 to go to Wellesley College, met my husband. We were 18. And now at 43 years old, as first-time homeowners in Boston, we had to leave for a number of years before we could afford to come back. And so I have a 9 and a 13-year-old here in Hyde Park, and Hyde Park keeps making the best neighborhoods list. We're seeing all the development, lots of meetings. Community meetings. So as a 43-year-old, I find that I'm on the younger end of the demographic here in Hyde Park, and I want to be in the room when decisions are being made. I want it to be more affordable for people like me to be first-time homeowners, especially as a black woman. I heard you speak to that demographic data, too.
Yeah.
So I know what it's like to be a young black woman and not want to be in Boston.
You know, Kayana, Hyde Park is one of the places that's still reasonably affordable. I mean, it's not that affordable, but don't you think it's one of the places that has not gone absolutely through the roof?
Yes, I absolutely agree. And there's just not enough housing for the amount of people that want to live here. So we have the Pride coming. That's really exciting, the LGBTQ plus senior housing that's being developed, that's getting a lot of press, and so many other developments for affordable housing that are happening. And I'm really excited about what's going to happen here in Hyde Park for affordable housing.
Hey, Kayana, don't go away. First of all, again, thank you for your first call. We hope you make another one soon. You say you're a 40-something black woman, and as we mentioned, the two demographics in this survey who are most likely to leave as in their 20s are LGBTQ people and young black women. Why do you think that is, the latter category? Why do you think that is?
I think affordability, number one, that was one of the reasons why I wanted to leave as I was graduating Wellesley College. I also think from a community perspective, we didn't have organizations like Boston While Black when I was coming out of college. I think that would have made a difference on getting me to stay. And I think I grew up in Columbus, Ohio, and one of the things I noticed here about Boston culturally is the amount of segregation. Sure, the numbers show how diverse it is, but everybody kind of sticks to themselves.
Yeah,
and so I think that's another faction.
Well, we're glad you're back in town, and we're glad you called. And as I said, please call us again, Kayana. Thank you very much for getting in touch with us. We appreciate it. 877-301-8970. Gretchen and Needham. My LGBTQ plus young adult will have a very hard time staying in Mass because of the cost of living. But, and this is what I would have thought, they want to stay here because our state protects their rights and has strict gun laws. That's what surprised me about the LGBTQ component of this survey. Again, along with black women being the most likely, we're a state that actually proudly supports LGBTQ people and their rights, which makes it even more upsetting that such people are contemplating leaving in their 20s, you know?
Listen to this. Harborview at the Navy Yard charges $4,000 per month for a tiny one-bedroom, a crazy price, and they just raised our rent to $4,400 per month, giving us only 6 days' notice to accept that ridiculous price or find a new place to live.
You know who used to live there? I won't say the name. A former boss of ours used to live here.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Harborview at Navy Yard?
It's really something.
Yeah. Well, how much does it cost to live down by the waterfront?
The average place? You mean the average price?
Yeah.
That you mean including scuba gear or not including scuba? It's good. That's incredible. Seaports, we've trumpeted the great film by David Abel, The Inundation District, about how the seaports can be underwater in about 3 minutes. And the rents, by the way, the rents you talked about incessantly with Jim Rooney, if there's one part of the city where they are most out of control, and by the way, one part of the city that is is most segregated, is the seaport. It's intense. It's
And the places around here, Somerville used to be cheaper. Somerville is enormously expensive now. I just visited a $3,500 a month dump over there in Somerville. That's crazy too.
By the way, Godfrey from Medford says, as a black person in Boston, makes me sad to see so many of my college friends leave Boston for Atlanta, Dallas, and Houston as the cost of living is less than it is here. One of our colleagues, I think it was Philip, did a great story about a year ago, I just realized, about young black, was it artists or professionals who are moving to places like Atlanta for similar sorts of reasons. So I guess this shouldn't surprise us. Joe and JP, welcome.
Hey guys, thank you for answering my call.
Sure.
So I am one of those younger people that are gonna leave Boston. Hispanic. I've been here for 15 years, ever since I moved from the Dominican Republic. And I used to love this city, but the price has skyrocketed. For what it is, namely the weather, I don't think Boston is that great anymore. I could go to San Diego and get a house that is bigger for slightly less of a price than Boston.
Is that where you're going? Is that where you're going to go?
It's not worth it.
Is that where you're going to go?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
And Joe, if affordability, particularly of housing, was not an issue, would you consider sticking around?
I would, but the way that transportation issues are going on, I think Boston is on top compared to other major cities in the U.S., but we cannot do it halfway. We cannot just have a transportation that is unreliable. I'd rather just go to a state that has not even half of what Boston has transportation-wise, and I'd rather just drive and park there.
Well, our transportation panel guests are listening to your call, and we're going to get them react to what you... Do you mind if I ask you how old you are, only because we're going to bring up your call with them? How old are you, Joe?
Sure. 31.
31. Great. Joe, we hope you stay, but we understand your pressing needs. Thank you much for sharing your story with us.
Here's Tatiana, who says, I'm 24 years old, live in Lawrence, Mass., and Lawrence is one of the poorest towns in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. She lives in Lawrence, Mass. I'm a young business professional, grew up in Andover, but currently live in Lawrence. I frequent Boston multiple times a week, but it has never been economical to make the move to the city, and my peers agree with me. We utilize the Haverhill commuter rail and T system as needed, but the astronomical rent prices, grocery prices, and cost to entertainment with foods and drinks for two is north of $75, where I can enjoy a similar meal for $25 or less in Andover.
Well, we're going to discuss this with our transportation panel in a couple of minutes, and we'll actually keep returning to this in the weeks ahead because it is alarming, as the Boston Chamber had to say.
Okay, after a quick break, we are going to be talking to our transportation panel. We're going to be talking about what's going on the T. We're going to talk about slow zones, T ridership, redo of Blue Hill Avenue, and how much everything costs around here. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
I'm Jared Bowen. Coming up on The Culture Show, scientist Mona Mikara spent years thinking of her blindness as something she needed to overcome. Then she realized she could literally explore cultural perceptions about disabilities by launching the travel docuseries titled Planes, Trains, and Canes. She joins us to talk about this and screening her work in an upcoming film festival. That and more on The Culture Show today at 2 on 89.7 GBH.
Support for our programs comes from you.
And Mass General Cancer Center, dedicated to providing compassionate care and cancer specialists who are experienced in the cancer you have. When you hear the word cancer, their team is ready. Learn more at massgeneral.org/cancer. And Q Legal, providing legal marketing solutions for law firms in Boston and beyond. Marketing strategies include websites, social media, video, and search. You can learn more about their services at qlegal.com.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy, Marjorie Egan. We're live at the library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News, facebook.com/GBH News. Again, our next day here is Friday. We'll have 4 performers from the Tony Award-winning Girl from the North Country, a musical that is composed of all songs by Bob Dylan. As I said, Marjorie and I are going to see it tonight. We're pretty excited. And Patti LuPone, who is a Broadway genius and was the first Evita, is going to zoom in too. Joining us now for our monthly transit panel, talk about good timing, is Jim Aloisi and Stacey Thompson. Jim is on Zoom. I assume he was just worried about a possible derailment. He's the former Massachusetts Transportation Secretary. It's good that they laughed at least. A member of the Transit Matters Board and a contributor to Commonwealth Beacon, which is Commonwealth Magazine's new name. Stacey is the executive director of the Livable Streets Alliance. Stacey, it's great to see you. Jim, good to talk to you.
Nice to see you too.
Yes.
Nice to be with you from my undisclosed location.
Your undisclosed location, that's right. Thank you very much for being with us. Well, as Jim just mentioned, we just talked with listeners, and you were here, Stacey, about this fact that 25% of people between 20 and 30 are going to want to get out of Greater Boston because everything is too expensive here, including problems with transportation.
Unreliability.
Let's put it that way.
Yep.
I want to play, before we get your reaction to all this, I want to play a clip of Mayor Wu. She was on our show yesterday responding to this survey and about people intending to move out of here to someplace else within the next 5 years. Here she is.
Well, we have the opposite problem where people want to be here, but then they can't make it past the hurdles of affordability and all the other pieces to fit your life together. It's housing, it's childcare costs, it's the transportation system. So those are the pieces that we're focused on, but we can't keep up fast enough with how quickly the kind of knowledge and innovation economy is shifting.
I wonder how long it's going to take, even with a best case scenario, to make the T reliable enough and fast enough that people aren't complaining about it all the time and moving.
I mean, complaining about the T is a rite of passage in Boston. It could be the best transit system in the world, and we're still going to complain about it. So I think that that's maybe an unrealistic expectation. But I found this report by the Chamber so interesting because I often like to remind people that in Boston, we're still about 125,000 people short of the population peak we saw in 1950. And so that means that we haven't even hit where we have been historically. And one of the greatest contributors to that is that our land use policy is a mess. And so, yes, the MBTA and the challenges with the MBTA are contributing to this, but we need to be able to build housing more densely, and we need people to be able to work close to home, be able to walk to the grocery store, walk to drop off their kids, be able to bike to places. The last time regionally we were able to hold a much larger population sustainably was when we were less dependent on cars. And I think that that's sort of a hard reality to come back to.
So, Jim, with a question we asked Jim Rooney from the Chamber at the top of the show was, assuming that he agreed, which I assume he did, that Mayor Wu and Governor Healy are in the right place on all of the issues that are concerning these 20-somethings in Greater Boston, are we going to get to the finish line quickly enough to end this outflow of people? Are we, or do you have real confidence that we are?
I think so. I mean, these things come in cycles. As you know, if you think about all the factors that keep people in place, I'm a lifelong Boston resident. What do people care about? You know, they care about education. I think you could tick the box. There are a lot of great education, especially higher ed facilities here. Healthcare, tick the box. We have the best in the world in Boston, Great Boston, right? The weather, not so much. By the way, the governor and the mayor, last I looked, they don't control the weather. Mm-hmm. Costs are high, but there was what Stacey said on the housing side. You have to build more. I mean, the days where I grew up, in East Boston in a triple-decker, and my father would never raise the rent because he liked the idea that a low rent and a good tenant were like a good combination. Those days don't seem to be with us anymore, and we need to understand that the best way, I think, to deal with the problem we've got is to increase capacity and to have some respectable limits on what people can charge.
Yeah,
on the transportation.
I was going to say on the transportation side. Yeah, go ahead.
On the transportation side, again, the mayor doesn't control this. So we're talking about the future of the city in areas that the mayor has very little control over, which is really a question about how we govern these agencies, right? I'm a little worried that the T is not turning around quite as quickly as it needs to, even though I think people are working very hard at reducing slow zones, et cetera, et cetera. We need, and I've said this before, a much more concentrated effort over the next decade to rebuild and reimagine the entirety of the T. And that's going to take a level of capacity, personnel capacity, and financial resources that are not currently available to the MBTA and that need to be made available if we're going to get it to a place where everyone wants it to be.
You know, Stacey, let me take issue with a couple of things Jim said. Maybe I should do with him, but I'll broach them with you, and then he can weigh in. One, while Wu doesn't have formal authority over a lot of things, by being the leader that she is on some of these issues, I think the potential for her worldview to trickle out to other communities, including the State House, has potential. That's one, even though she has no formal authority. Two, what worries me most about the T is not just the inability of the legislature to belly up to the bar and have the courage to do what needs to be done on the funding front, which we've talked about ad nauseum. I think stories have more impact on how people feel about institutions. And when you read the story, was it last week? Minutes, I think it was, after the T was celebrating, I don't mean that in a pejorative way, celebrating that a bunch of other slow zones were eliminated, there's a derailment. And that, to me, has an emotional impact on somebody that all the intellectual talk about, well, we've now eliminated the slow zones, it's the end of 2024, you know what I'm talking about, that poisons people and maybe never to come back.
Yeah, I mean, I actually agree with you on the Michelle Wu point, and I think I also agree with the other Jim.
Nice try, but go ahead.
Because I think that there's a difference between influence and power. So Jim Aloisi is correct that no, she can't fund the T, she can't do it. Do I think that Mayor Wu is one of the most influential transit mayors in the country? Absolutely. We are talking about the MBTA differently because of her. We are talking about the affordability of the system and making it free because of her, and it's trickling into conversations across the country. So I think that she's using every lever she can to move the conversation, but she needs partners. She's not superhuman and can't do it alone. On the part around, the constant bad news from the T, I agree, and I think that it's hard to tell a story when you're in the middle of fixing a problem, right? What we're seeing is the T inheriting a really old house with a lot of problems, and they've replaced the floor, but the roof is still leaking, and it's hard for us to see the forest for the trees in that. And they still aren't doing a great job of communicating the vision. If you asked, anyone right now, where is the T going to be in 10 years? What are we building toward? What are we trying to achieve? We don't have that right now. And so it's hard to get excited to point to a future when we're just sort of running from story to story.
Well, but you guys are both talking big picture. Let me talk smaller picture. The one thing I would argue, Jim, where Phil Lang has given an actual date for the fairly close future, all slow zones eliminated by the end of the year, which is not that far away. However, I know how I relate to the world. When I get set in a particular behavior, I stick with that behavior for better or worse. And my fear is we've had a nightmare for so long with the T. By the time he makes the formal announcement, no more slow zones, people are set in their car driving or whatever kind of ways they are. Do you think I'm exaggerating
No, I don't. I think that people's attitudes about public transportation in Boston are getting fixed. You can see this has plateaued and is sort of sticking at 60, 65% of pre-pandemic, and it isn't moving. So it's a real threat. The other issue that I just need, the messaging is important. The ending of the slow zones is really, really important. But if you look at the data, and I look at it all the time, and you look at what's causing disruptions on a day-to-day basis, right? Real disruptions, particularly on the line I use and love, the red line. It's train malfunction. It's quote-unquote medical emergency, which is a euphemism for other things. And so...
What other things?
Other things, social dysfunction, and the fact and how it disrupts the operations of the system. And we not just Phil, we only candidly understand that when the slow zones are solved, we still won't have new red line trains, and trains will continue to be disabled. And how do we message that? And we also need, in the Commonwealth, this is not an MBTA issue, but it's affecting the T ridership, which is, an issue of social dysfunction where the T is being asked to play the role of social service and public health, and it's not able to, it's not equipped to. It has no training or capacity to. And we're failing people. We're failing the folks who need help, medical help and compassionate help, and we're also failing riders who are being constantly, disadvantaged in terms of their access to opportunity. It's a real crisis that's also being shared in many other places in the country. But my larger point is fixing the slow zones is great, but fixing the slow zones won't be enough. And we need to figure out how to message this in a way where people understand and where, frankly, I go back to the legislature understands that the capacity that the T has, by capacity I mean personnel that you fund who can do more work more quickly. It's not where it needs to be.
When you talk about social dysfunction, you talking about people misbehaving on the T? What are you talking about?
I'm talking about a variety of issues where people are behaving in what I would call a socially dysfunctional way, right? We as a society tend to gloss over this. We use the phrase homeless, right? Yeah. And I dislike that because folks who are socially dysfunctional on the T may also be unhoused, right? Yeah. But the problem from the rider perspective and from a disruption perspective is that they're socially dysfunctional, right? If someone's, we all see it who use the T, we all understand it, and we need to candidly address it, but the T has no capacity to do this. The state needs to bring a level of social and public health compassionate services to the task that's not enough right now.
So you're saying people are scared to ride the T because they're afraid they might confront something that
there's
scary.
Two components.
Okay.
There's the ridership issue of some people feeling scared, but there's the disruption issue where a train is just held, named the station, Park Street for 20 minutes.
Okay. I just got an update to that survey that said 25% of 20-somethings were leaving. They just heard the two of you. The other 75% are leaving too, by the way. So staying with stories for a second, one of the things we intended to talk to Mayor Wu about yesterday, we just ran out of time, was this Blue Hill Ave dedicated center, which I love in the abstract. I don't live there, so maybe I'm missing something. The flip side of stories like a derailment is when something's built, it seems to me, that's sleek and clean and pretty and works and is on time, that too can change minds. Can you briefly describe, Stacey, what's happening there and whether we should be as happy about it as I seem to be?
Yes. So, and actually, I think Jim Aloisi has a long, hairy history with this project too, and could probably give us some deeper backstory. But essentially, for folks who don't know, Blue Hill Ave is so wide and straight because it used to hold a transit line that was taken away from the community decades ago. There is a long history of trying to bring transit back and not engaging the community properly. But a couple of years ago, Ayanna Presley was able to help the city of Boston secure federal dollars to put a center running bus lane and sort of get funds for what is being called a multimodal corridor. And the city.
What does that mean?
That means that it would provide funding to go from sidewalk to sidewalk and potentially improve sidewalks, crosswalks, create a center running bus lane that will feel more like when you're underground on the Silver Line is usually how I describe it, right? You're still going to hit maybe a little bit like the Green Line, a little bit, like rail, but on a bus, with really nice stations, really nice stops, feedback boards that tell you when the buses are coming, and potentially some bike lanes in the community too. And that all costs a lot of money. So it's a really big win, but it's a huge transformation in a community that has seen a lot of disinvestment, and that's scary, reasonably, scary for folks who are used to the city not showing up and taking care of these problems.
So what's your history with this, Jim Aloisi, briefly?
Briefly, when I was secretary, the first proposal for this sort of center running bus rapid transit came as part of our response to the Great Recession and using federal ARA money, if you remember, stimulus money back in the Obama administration. We proposed a $150 million BRT connecting Mattapan Square to Nubian. And it failed because we had a lot of pressure to move those funds out quickly. We didn't have time for public engagement. The community could not get their heads and arms around this. But good ideas are resilient, and so I'm really happy that this idea has taken root, and I think it's going to be transformative in a way that will improve access and equity for people using that bus.
We're talking to Jim Aloisi and Stacey Thompson, our transit people.
I was just going to mention in terms of Blue Hill Avenue, though, Taylor Dalton, who covers transit for the Globe, has got a quote from Ed Gaskin, who runs the Greater Grove Hall Main Streets, is very concerned about something Jim is talking about all the time, that they're not going to have a place to park. They're really worried about parking.
Marjorie, this was going back to when I was secretary. People think that they have the privilege to double and triple park. There's going to be plenty of parking. The city is not going to have a situation where it's going to reduce parking to a point where it hurts business. And there's no evidence in any data that you look at anywhere that's put in a dedicated bus lane, a dedicated cycling lane, that it hurts local businesses. People, I understand, are afraid of change. Change is always scary to people.
I think he's talking to me.
But I guarantee you that if you can research the data as long as you want, you won't find anything that indicates these kinds of dedicated lanes for bus or bike hurt business.
Wait, except the survey in Cambridge that showed that 60% of the business owners believe their revenues declined because the installation of bike lanes. Stacey.
What did the rest of the study show?
I'm just reading from the Crimson at Harvard. They must be telling the truth.
Well, I want to follow up on Jim's point and then shift to Cambridge.
Let's not. Let's go to Alston in a minute, but go ahead.
But no, just say that one thing that I want to shout out the city of Boston for is that they've committed to a multimodal corridor with center running bus lane. That is specific. But they've also committed over the next year to going block by block, to working with stakeholders, and where parking is a genuine issue. When we're talking about loading for businesses, when we're talking about parking for churches, they're committed to working with those community members to find a solution. Maybe there's a parking lot around the corner that isn't used on the weekends, right? So I would say, I know Ed well, and I think that he's reflecting a concern in the community, and I also think the city has a plan to actually address at this time.
Okay, so here's the headline in the Boston Globe, Stacey. Federal government contributes $335 million to redo the Mass Pike in Alston. I'm reading about that, and by the way, I've had a hard time grasping what exactly they're doing, and hopefully you'll explain it. And I'm feeling pretty positive till I get to the paragraph where Ed Markey takes credit, as well he should, for helping to get $3 billion. That was fine until he likened the Alston project, I'm reading from the Globe, John Chesto, to the Big Dig, which I thought was probably not a wonderful reference for neighborhood people. So start with the beginning, in simple language. What's going to happen, and how fast is it allegedly going to happen?
Well, first, I think you need to listen to the Big Dig podcast if you haven't already.
It is great. It's got a hell of an ending, too.
So for those who haven't listened, I think it's a good precursor to this conversation.
A GBH podcast with Ian Cost, by the way, if you don't know.
Fantastic.
But that's fabulous. Go ahead.
But, sometimes you need to make big, complicated, expensive choices in order to get a positive outcome. Livable Streets has been working with community members on this Alston project for 10 years. I can't shout out enough. Like, Ed Markey gets credit, Ayanna Presley gets credit. $335 million in this political context is a lot of work, and including the Healy administration, right? They did what the Baker administration could not do for 8 years. So I think it's a huge win, and we should be hopeful.
Okay, what's it going to do?
That money is going to ground a viaduct on I-90 that is falling apart, basically an important commuting corridor for Metro West. It is going to build a new commuter rail and bus station. It is going to knit back a whole street network. It's going to open up land for potential development, for housing, for other uses. It's going to do a lot, and frankly, it's probably going to do more than what the Big Dig to a certain extent. But the state is now in essentially a race to get the details right. We cannot mess this project up, and there are still a lot of details that need to be sorted out. You can do this project the right way, you can do this project the wrong way. And the other thing that I would note is that the specific federal program that we got this money from is called Reconnecting Communities, which means that the feds are going to expect the state to knock it out of the park, to build phenomenal transit facilities, to build phenomenal walking and biking facilities. And if we don't do that, in addition to fixing all the problems in the river, they could claw that money back. So the clock is ticking now.
Jim, are you as enthusiastic but concerned like your colleague?
I'm not that concerned. I'm very enthusiastic. I think this is going to be one of the key transformative projects that build. We're talking about people leaving Boston. What's going to keep some people from leaving and staying are projects like Alston. Every dollar spent on this project is a dollar spent on everything we say we want for our values. Reducing traffic congestion, reducing carbon emissions, reducing particulate emissions, re-knitting neighborhoods. This is correcting the mistakes of the past, and with the elevated highway that was built by Bill Callahan in the early 60s, and offering people all along the corridor between Boston and Worcester the chance to have a better multimodal connection, not just to access to places in Boston, but across the river to Kendall when the Grand Junction line is open. So if you contrast this to the Cape Cod bridges, every dollar spent on that Cape Cod project, in my opinion, is doubling down on everything we say we don't want. More traffic congestion, more emissions. Every dollar spent on Alston is the exact opposite.
Okay, can I give you both an assignment, borrowing a word? I'm serious, from you, Jim Eloise. You got messaging before. If this thing is as spectacular as you say it is, on so many levels, maybe the leaders who are sponsoring, including you two, should figure out how the hell to explain it to mere mortals. Can anybody in the audience here, if they hadn't spoken, describe what this Alston multimodal thing was? Anybody? Not one hand is going up. I'm serious, in the studio.
I know.
It's important that people know what the hell we're buying.
The road's not going to fall down.
Okay.
We don't want that to happen, right? The road is not going to fall down.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Jim. I'm sorry. Don't you think
if anybody wants to appoint Stacey and myself as sort of
chief
messaging officers for the Commonwealth, we're happy to do it. But look.
You have 30 seconds. 30 seconds.
Yeah. There's nothing not to like about the Alston project. It's multifaceted, it's multimodal, and it's going to have a measurable positive impact on all the things.
We need to know why. Fill in the blanks. Go ahead, 30 seconds. I heard that. 30 seconds.
To be fair, and I don't disagree with you, basically until this moment, we weren't exactly sure what was going to be built.
Okay.
So why don't you write something for Commonwealth Beacon? Seriously.
Maybe I should.
Okay, maybe you should. Okay.
Hey, we're out
and
of time.
You do something too.
But thank you very much to Stacey Thompson and Jim Aloisi.
Have me follow up with the podcast.
We'll follow up. Oh, actually, let's go. I'm sorry.
Jim is the former Massachusetts Secretary of Transportation, Secretary and member of the Transit Matters Board, and a contributor to Commonwealth Magazine. We'll be writing that article very, very soon. Stacey, Executive Director of the Livable Streets Alliance. Thank you both. Coming up after the noon news, Harvard national security expert Juliet Kayyem on the latest on Israel and Gaza. What is going on with Boeing?
Beat country music-loving detective Mike Shepard arrives in Brokenwood. He soon discovers that this small town is full of big secrets. Don't miss Brokenwood Mysteries, tonight at 9 on GBH 44.
I'm Lino from Dorchester, and you and I are listening to 89.7 WGBH HD1 Boston, online at gbhnews.org. GBH News, we're NPR. What matters to you?
I'm Jim Brown, U.S. President.
I'm Marjorie Egan. It's a special live music Wednesday here, St. Patrick's Day edition, with owner of the Burn, Tommy McCarthy on bagpipes, and wife of the late Brian O'Donovan, Lindsay O'Donovan on piano. Then it's Dorchester's own and CNN chief national correspondent John King, and we'll end the show with this. Is it tacky to ask friends and family to a dinner party you're hosting, and then ask them to help pay? That's next on Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH.
Into the CCP and remain operational in the United States, or side with the CCP and face the consequences.
Opponents warn the legislation would harm content creators and small businesses. They say the bill violates the free speech rights of its more than 170 million users. The measure heads to the Senate, but it's unclear when lawmakers will act on it. President Biden said if Congress enacts a law, he will sign it. TikTok is likely to fight any ban in court. Deirdre Walsh, NPR News.
A day after several more states held nominating contests, President Biden and former President Donald Trump have each garnered enough delegates to secure their respective parties' presidential nomination. And today, Trump secured a legal win in an election interference case in Georgia. The judge overseeing the racketeering case against him and his allies quashed a number of charges related to soliciting officials to violate their oaths of office. The EU's top diplomat is accusing Israel of deliberately starving Palestinians in Gaza. This as the U.S. and other countries attempt to deliver aid to Gaza via airdrops or by sea. Here's NPR's Dee Parvaz.
In a statement made before the UN Security Council on Tuesday, EU Foreign Policy Chief Josep Borrell accused Israel of using starvation as a weapon of war in Gaza. Starvation is being used as a war arm, said Borrell, adding that the UN should condemn what's happening in Gaza as it did in Ukraine. At least 23 children have died of malnutrition in Gaza, according to the local health ministry, with the UN estimating that roughly a quarter of Gaza's population is one step away from famine, and less than half of the needed humanitarian aid getting in. In an interview with Politico on Sunday, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu denied that people were starving in Gaza. Dee Parvaz, NPR News, Tel Aviv.
The NAACP is asking black student athletes in the U.S. to re-examine their schooling decision if they're trying to go to school in Florida. Here's NPR's Tristan Plunkett.
The NAACP says it aims to hold Florida's Governor Ron DeSantis and all elected officials accountable for, as the organization puts it, their attempts to unravel our democracy. The University of Florida recently axed all positions associated with diversity, equity, and inclusion, referred to as DEI programs, which implored the organization to send a letter to prospective athletes and the NCAA. DeSantis has said DEI initiatives are discriminatory, and his administration has pushed to limit them in the state. In his letter, the NAACP says DeSantis has made no effort to conceal his administration's efforts to devalue Black America, and that such actions demand a response.
It's NPR.
Good afternoon. With the latest from the GBH Newsroom, I'm Henry Santoro. Massachusetts Governor Maura Healey making her blanket pardon for those convicted of marijuana possession official. Healey made the announcement today, saying it's the most sweeping action by a governor since President Biden called on states to issue marijuana pardons.
Greater opportunity for housing because people won't be prevented from renting due to a criminal conviction. People
If approved by the here we go.
Justice requires it. Massachusetts decriminalized possession for personal use back in 2008, legalized it in 2016. Yet thousands of people are still living with a conviction on their records.
There she is in the Great Hall at the State House. If approved by the Governor's Council, the pardon would automatically apply to all misdemeanor convictions. Worcester's Ed Augustus has had many titles over the years. He's been a state senator, Worcester city manager, a chief of staff, and he's currently Massachusetts Secretary of Housing and Livable Communities chief. But that's not all. He's one of 3 people named to the inaugural list of the Worcester Red Sox Hall of Fame. Augustus helped to clear the way for the Boston Red Sox AAA affiliate to move from Pawtucket, Rhode Island to Worcester during his time as city manager. Hall of Fame announcement was made on Monday, and it's a small one, but it's pretty impressive. Joining Augustus at Polar Park were fellow inductees former Woo Sox owner and current chairman Larry Lucchino, and Woo Sox hitting coach and former Red Sox catcher, the great Rich Gedman. A formal induction ceremony will be held later this year. You're listening to GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Progressive Insurance with Snapshot, a personalized program that bases rates on safe driving habits, at Progressive.com. Not available in California or from all agents. This is NPR.
Mr. Browdy, I am Marjorie Egan. Welcome to hour number 2 of Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH. We are broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library on Wednesday, because now we're here 3 days a week, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday. We're going to be back here on Friday with Patty LaPone, and she's going to zoom in. And tonight, that's on Friday. Tonight, Jim and I are actually going to see Girl from the North Country. Not that you care about that, but on Friday, the Tony award-winning people from that show are going to be here to perform for us right here in the studio live on Friday.
And it's all Bob Dylan music. And you know what the difference is between Bob Dylan singing it and these people? We actually understand what they're saying, which will really be fabulous. We're joined now at the desk by national security expert Julia Kayyem. She's former assistant secretary for Homeland Security under President Obama and currently the faculty chair of the Homeland Security program at Harvard's Kennedy School of Government. Her latest book is The Devil Never Sleeps, Learning to Live in an Age of Disasters. Hi, Juliet.
Hello.
Hey,
Hello.
to you.
Pre-applause.
has. I haven't said a word. I love it. It's all downhill from here. Thank you all for coming out. My goal in life is to stress out your producer, Jamie, with my 4-minute before arrival time, to which I say I am never late, but early is a work.
Did we ask you a question to which you're responding? No, I don't think so.
Jamie sits there and we make him nervous, and I just wanted to say.
Okay, well, I am going to ask you a question right after this. I want to play a little sound. This is Democratic Representative Ted Lieu yesterday asking a series of questions contrasting Biden's handling of classified documents with the allegations against Trump. He's asking the special prosecutor, here it is.
Did you find that President Biden directed his personal assistant to move boxes of documents to hide them from the FBI?
No.
Did you find that President Biden directed his personal assistant to delete security camera footage after the FBI asked for that footage?
No.
Did you find that President Biden directed his lawyer to pay $150,000 in hush money to a former Playboy model?
No.
In your investigation, did you find that President Biden called the Georgia Secretary of State to demand that he, quote, find 11,780 votes?
No.
Did you find that leading up to January 6, 2021, President Biden urged his supporters to travel to D.C. and to storm the Capitol?
No.
Okay, so that was one of the moments.
Pretty
Clearly, a
effective.
contrast between Joe Biden and Donald Trump. But what were any other takeaways you may have from the hearings?
I mean, just to the special prosecutor resigned from the Department of Justice the day before this testimony to give him, I think, more freedom. He was trained PR-wise with a long list of Republican operatives. So he walked in there having lost any aura in my mind of being an independent assessor. And he had also walked in there after issuing a public report, which he knew was inconsistent with the record of the interview with Biden, because that eventually got released. In his report, people will remember, a report that is about classified information. There's a long discourse about Biden's mental capacity, and that he forgot his son, Beau Biden's, the year that Beau died. I mean, you asked me how old I am. I can't remember.
No,
I mean, it's
just
the most ridiculous thing. Anyway, so he writes this whole thing as if that was relevant to the federal charges. But what he also knew, which is, I think, all gloves are off, which is what you heard from the Democratic House yesterday, is he also knew that there was testimony that showed Biden sort of, picking up on that narrative. At one stage, says to Biden, "You have an incredible memory." Photographic memory. Biden eventually, remembers what year his son died. And, I was reading online last night people who talk about grief, or who were writing about grief, the loss of a parent or a child, and saying, I know exactly what I was wearing. I know exactly how I felt. Yeah, sometimes I even get the year mixed up. It was what kind of person does that, right? I mean, and that's what I thought. He knew that the date was corrected, and he also knew that Biden had his mental faculties, and to use his son's death as a way to gain political points. I said, who does that? I mean, a lot of people do that, unfortunately. And so it was a really bad day for her. And then the Republican GOP is walking away very quickly from any thought that they can get anything relevant on an impeachment hearing. They don't have a single case. They don't have a single thing that's holding up once it's under scrutiny.
The other thing, we played sound from Congressman Lieu, but there was more sound where his questions were, did Joe Biden so-and-so? And it was not only a comparison of the big picture, Biden versus Trump's lawlessness, but also about how he handled the documents. Yeah. And talk about messaging, which we were just doing with our transportation people. I think the Biden administration and his supporters have done such a horrible message, with the exception of Jamie Raskin and Ted Lieu and Adam Schiff and a few others. The cases against the two of them is different. The only thing that's similar is their classified documents involved. One guy basically told his lawyer to lie. Yeah. He didn't cooperate with the Justice Department. He wouldn't sit down for an investigation. We learned from whatever his name is, Witness 5 the other day, that they were putting boxes on a plane right before the FBI got there and shipping them to New Jersey. Yeah. It is literally as different as two cases could be.
He had worked for the former president for 20 years.
Right, exactly.
Basically said that the former president was lying.
I don't don't know where we're getting these special prosecutors from. I don't know what happened.
Merrick Garland's fault.
I
it's
have
Joe
to
Biden's
say,
own attorney general's fault for picking a guy like this.
Here's the Department of Justice's fault, and I work with public safety agencies a lot, and when I'm in government, I work with them. They want to believe that there's this idea of law and order and whatever outside of a democracy. So they think it's noble to say, well, that's too political, or that could be viewed as too political. And it's 2024. If you don't recognize that you will be viewed politically, or that you will be used politically, that is a political statement. And that's exactly what happened to this Department of Justice. It was like, oh, we're going to get this special prosecutor. Well, you know what? He quit the day before he's about to testify. He's getting media training from the GOP. How are we not ready that morning as the Department of Justice to say, we no longer have confidence in the special prosecutor given it? I mean, I don't want to say play the game. I was like, recognize that the arena is using you, and that's what's essentially happened.
Well, let me quote Marjorie Egan. When yesterday I was saying that Merrick Garland was so naive, the Attorney General picked somebody who was a Trump U.S. attorney, and the notion that Republicans would then be convinced of the integrity of his investigation, which is ridiculous.
Yeah.
Marjorie said it a couple of weeks ago. Merrick Garland would be a great Supreme Court justice, is so ill-equipped to be an Attorney General of the United States based on the current political reality.
That is exactly.
He's like a 1950s
He
kind
really
of guy.
is.
Well, it's just also, it's like, you remember when I used to get so upset, like all the doctors during COVID would be like, follow the science. And you're like, what does that mean? Like, I mean, it's like, does it mean my kid goes to school or not go to school? Like, they have these platitudes, and the DOJ is like, oh, we don't do politics. You know what? You're like, dream on. You don't have to be political. You just have to recognize that you're in the arena and you're being used, by the other side. And that's exactly what Hur did, until the House Democrats had a really good day. They were phenomenal.
So let's go.
That guy isn't, I mean, someone will pick him up, but if he's, I have a theory that he's thinking Trump's going to win and he gets to be the first, he'll get a circuit court judgeship and then the first Asian American Supreme Court justice. I mean, they all have an agenda. Like, the guy didn't wake up and all of a sudden be MAGA. They have an agenda.
Until Trump says he's a piece of crap, which
right,
always
exactly.
happens.
I know.
So Gaza, Joe Biden, under obviously a lot of pressure, I think, is a moral matter, I hope, plus a lot of Democratic voters in places like Michigan and even here very upset about what's happening and what may happen in Gaza, comes up with this floating port thing.
Oh, my God.
And, well, that's what I want to know. And not only does it appear to be 60 days
away
from completion, which it seems to me means a lot more starved to death people, like the little beautiful 10-year-old boy whose photograph we've seen nonstop and should see. But is it even a workable? Is the floating port even a workable idea?
I mean, do I want to put humanitarian relief boats in those waters? I mean, I don't even know what the rules of engagement are. I don't know what kind of protective force that whatever this thing is. He mentioned it. I should go back. He mentioned it last Thursday night at the State of the Union, and this follows up the decision to do airlifts and to drop food over people over the starving Palestinians. That it's hard to criticize the delivery of food because some food is better than no food. It is so objectionable that we are at this stage. Israel has blocked off humanitarian relief for the Palestinians, nearly 2 million of them, as Netanyahu is discussing going into the one area, Rafah, that might still be sustainable. You get most humanitarian relief agencies do not like airdrops. One is you can't control it. It wasn't us, but 5 countries are doing airdrops. One of them fell out of its parachute and crushed 5 Palestinians who wanted. It's more dehumanizing to the people on the ground because there's no process. We know how to build processes for feeding people, and Israel has denied that essentially. And this is allegedly our ally. I don't know a single instance in which we have promised or we are trying to build an access point to a occupied territory by one of our allies to be able to feed the people there. And it's about time. Whatever fissures you're seeing between Biden and Netanyahu, it's about time. Whatever happened in October, the horror, the terror, the rapes, it cannot justify this. And if more Americans and more Jewish Americans spoke up about it, you would start to see a political shift. It's outrageous.
That's what I don't understand, because you do read a lot about many Jewish people in Israel are very upset with what's going on. So I don't get it. Why don't they say, open up the roads from Israel into Gaza, or that's it.
Well, wait a second. I mean, we've criticized Congress for not doing it. Chris Van Hollen and other Democratic senators are saying there's a possibility there'll be conditions. He's tying it to an invasion of Rafah. I think it should be tied to what you're talking about.
Yeah, well, Rafah is not. I mean,
I agree.
I mean, look, I come from the world of counterterrorism. I speak of what I know. Rafah is not a counterterrorism effort. If he goes into Rafah, it is a pure, you can give whatever words you want. It is a slaughter. And so whatever Netanyahu is planning, it is good that Democrats are starting to speak up. And I just say this from my heart. If more Jewish American groups spoke up about this, you would start to see the political shift that is absolutely necessary to get. I think we know Netanyahu is weak to start to begin the kind of support that Israelis need to get this guy out. I mean, there's the path to solution does not go through Netanyahu. I cannot describe what's about to happen in Rafah.
Why can't Biden be more forceful?
I think he's trying, and I think he needs more domestic political support, and too many people are remaining silent during this. You can, as I often say, there's this word called "and." You can condemn the terror attacks in October against Hamas and think that this is a slaughter.
Can we, speaking of Biden being stronger, and I'm operating the assumption that behind the scenes the United States government is doing the right thing. Who knows?
Well, I think they should be doing it in the front of the scenes. Can we play a little bit? Well, it's interesting. Well, actually, I think Biden attempted to do that in an MSNBC interview. I think this is the day after the State of the Union. We're just going to play this back in Brighton up through the first few words from Joe Biden. Here's a reporter's question, and then you'll hear what Joe Biden has to say.
Do you have a red line? For instance, would invasion of Rafah, which you have urged him not to do, would that be a red line?
It is a red line. But
okay, stop him there. And here's Netanyahu basically deciding to call out the president of the United States. Here's the prime minister of Israel.
I have a red line. You know what the red line is? That October 7th doesn't happen again. Never happens again. And to do that, we have to complete the destruction of the Hamas terrorist army.
Right, and the destruction of the Palestinian people.
Right.
But the incredible thing to me, it is one thing when Netanyahu pretty much plays along and then does whatever he wants. Here he basically tries to ridicule, in my opinion, ridicule the president of the United States. And I think, getting back to what you said, that's an opportunity for Joe Biden to be more public about what his position is here. I mean, by the way, to Biden's credit, and I'm not saying he's done enough, he has repeatedly spoken about the fact that a two-state solution, which is opposed by Netanyahu, is the only long-term solution that would lead to peace. And either Blinken or one of his people said what is so necessary to be said. These murders, and they are, of innocent Palestinians are breeding terrorism that they and we in the United States, from what I read, you can tell me if I'm wrong, are going to be living with for generations potentially. I mean, that's another issue. Are we at risk here?
Yes, ODNI, the Office of Director of National Intelligence, released their global threat assessment on Sunday, and people like me read it. And nothing that new, although it actually had sort of a little section on sort of paramilitary forces, which I thought was interesting when we talk about Ukraine. But on this issue, they were pretty clear that the international terror threat environment that is either a consequence directly of what's happening in Gaza or because of radicalization of people who see these images has increased the threat environment for American interest abroad, but also for the United States. That last part, I don't know. I mean, that's what you know. I mean, I don't know what that number is, but certainly it's something that people are watching in terms of what's the long-term strategy? It is clear Netanyahu doesn't have one. And so I think Biden's taking the long game, which is at some stage there will be an ability to speak openly about the path forward for Israel. That path, the path of the future for not just the Palestinians, but for the Israelis who are in a war, just does not lead. It doesn't go through Netanyahu. It doesn't even come close. I mean, he's like a different force field over here. Still talking the language of essentially annihilation. That's what he's talking about.
When you talk about just a matter of time, many people believe, and I am among them, I think Marjorie is too, is one of a number of things that could cost Biden the presidency.
Is Michigan,
is this.
My people.
Exactly. And so that happens. And then you have a president who basically said on some show in the last couple of weeks, go for it, Netanyahu, namely Donald Trump. So time matters here in a really serious way.
For Arab Americans who voted non-committed in the primary, in their primary a week ago, about over now 100,000. And you're seeing that vote elsewhere. I mean, part of it is that's not a Trump vote, and Trump will remind us what his plan is for the Muslims and the Palestinians. I mean, come on, people.
We're talking to Julia
So before we move off of this, just for 1 second. So unless Israel agrees to open up the roads that would lead from Israel to Gaza, we're talking, as Jim says...
Egypt too.
Egypt too, that's right. Thank you. We're talking weeks before this floating pier. So we're talking...
2 months they're talking
so
about.
You've got to get children starving to death.
You're right. And you've got to get... So let me just explain the geography. You've got to get the food from water to land, right? This is not that hard to think of. There is a very, very... unsafe is the wrong word. There is a increased risk to any entity that is going to do this by water. It's very hard to protect your assets on water. Any person can get into a dinghy and do something. We're seeing what's happening at Suez with the Houthis, who are like a second-tier terror group and are basically closing the Suez Canal. So I have yet to see. Is there going to be force protection? Well, then all of a sudden now...
And food protection.
And food,
military
food that's what I meant, like food protection.
To protect the food.
Right, so then you're exposing yourself to even more, more risk, as the United States says, and Jordan and others. I do want to say, I mean, I know I will stand here as I've stood here and, condemn the Arab nations as well and the Arab leadership as well, who hardly have who are not great about the Palestinians. But the most recent denial of food shipment, at least according to the World Food Organization, the one that Cindy McCain runs now, is because of Israel. They have said that. So I'm not both sidesing it. It literally, the people on the ground said they were turned around because of Israeli forces.
So we only have a couple minutes left, but Boeing. I mean, it's like the tea. It's like virtually every single day, from a nosedive to a whistleblower ending up dead in his apartment. We all know about that infamous door situation. Where are we? And it seems to me, as a layperson, the problem is they essentially have a monopoly. So we have to tolerate dangerous ineptitude.
Well, 1 to 2,
Okay.
So how do you use your liquid Dawn?
To seal doors on airplanes.
That's exactly what we've discovered in this review. That was unbelievable. I was like, really? You can do that? Like, instead of crazy glue? That is really... Basically, the FAA is doing this review of the 737 MAX, has sent about 30 investigators, and one of them saw Spirit Mechanics, I guess that's a feeder into the Boeing system, applied liquid Dawn soap to a door seal as lubricant. This is so interesting in the fit-up process. I have no idea what that means, but that's a unique use of liquid Dawn. So Boeing went from what was the thing? If it isn't Boeing, I'm not going. To give me some rope and we'll keep the door closed. It comes from the top. There's no amount of surveillance or no amount of auditing by the FAA that is going to solve Boeing's problem. Boeing's problem is a lack of interest in a safety culture that has consistently come from the top since they merged 20 or 30 years ago. The 737 MAX is plagued. People ask me, I do go on them. I mean, at this stage, how are you going to, what are the choices? But they do have a monopoly on U.S. airlines, although you're starting to see the airlines not go to other companies. We certainly won't go
Airbus?
Airbus. But at least delay their ordering of new airplanes. I will say
Tell
this, and this
about
has
the whistleblower.
Yeah, then there's a side story. That, one does not want to assume anything. So I'm just going to say what the facts are. There's a whistleblower within engineering at Boeing. Engineering is where Boeing used to be great, really great, and then not. He is a whistleblower about their safety and security conditions, about what engineers are told, what they're allowed to disclose, that basically sound like they're in violation of regulations. This case is going forward. He's a big whistleblower, and he's found to have succumbed to suicide, at least by the reports just yesterday, right before a deposition. So obviously, we have no idea. We have no idea his mental health, but we also know that even that there's going to be lots of rumors about it, but just I think the stress of going after Boeing. This reminds me a lot of NASA before the space shuttle. I mean, the FAA has reported at least 33. They failed 33 of 56 audits. That means that while the door and the Alaska Airlines may have been the reason why, right? Just as the O-ring in the Space Shuttle Challenger was the reason why, there were 32 other reasons that this thing could have gone down. It was just that was the one thing.
So we're out of time. Just quickly, would you recommend? I know you can only have on 3. Would you recommend people travel with 2.5 ounces of Dawn?
Yes, I think you're going to see the flight attendants at the beginning go, in the event of an emergency, there is a bottle of Dawn under your chair, and oh my God.
Squeeze it on something.
Oh my gosh. It's anyway.
By the way, we intend to discuss TikTok with you. We're out of town. We should just say the House vote overwhelmingly voted to ban. It's on to the Senate. That should solve everything. Where it's dicier, we can talk about that next week. It's great to see you, Juliette.
Bye, everyone. Thank you for coming. I'm so thrilled to be here.
We are thrilled to have you. Absolutely.
Okay.
Speaking with Juliette Kayyem, she is former Assistant Secretary for Homeland Security under President Barack Obama and the faculty chair of the Homeland Security Program at Harvard's Kennedy School of Government. Her latest book, The Devil Never Sleeps, Learning to Live in an Age of Disasters. Up next, I'm so excited about this, former Chief of Disguise for the CIA, John Mendes, is out with a new memoir. You want to know about disguises, leaving any Hollywood disguises right in the dust? She's going to tell us about that, and cameras and buttons and cigarette packs and matches and rings and belts and everywhere else. You're going to hear all about CIA tricks up next. You're listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH. We are broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library and streaming on youtube.com/GBH News and facebook.com/GBH News.
I'm Arun Roth. Coming up on GBH's All Things Considered, the state is launching a new family court system focused on juvenile crime. Young people in Massachusetts are reacting to a congressional effort to rein in TikTok. And Governor Healy is issuing her blanket pardon for those convicted of marijuana possession. Those stories and all the day's news starting at 4 on GBH's All Things Considered.
Funding for our programs comes from you. And Central Square Theater, presenting Beyond Words, a new play inspired by the life of Dr. Irene Pepperberg and the African gray parrot, Alex, begins March 14th. Tickets at centralsquaretheater.org. And Mass General Brigham Health Plan, innovative plans, coverage, and a broad network of doctors. Mass General Brigham Health Plan, with you every day. For more information, you can visit massgeneralbrighamhealthplan.org.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Marjorie Egan and Jim Browdy. We're live at the library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News and facebook.com/GBH News. We're now joined by a very special guest, the former Chief of disguise for the CIA, Jana Mendez. With an impressive 27 years of service in the CIA under her belt, she's often compared to Q in the James Bond series. She's the co-author of a number of books, including Argo, about her former husband, her late husband, and obviously, won an Oscar ultimately. Now she tells her own story as a woman in the CIA, and her latest is called In True Face, A Woman's Life in the CIA Unmasked, including an incredible story about a meeting with a president of the United States in disguise. And the president happened to be the former head of the CIA. She's in town for an event tonight at the fabulous Boston Athenaeum. She joins us here. Jana Mendez, it's great to meet you.
Thank you.
Is this what you really look like, by the way, or no?
If I could do something better, I would. I left it at Langley.
You're doing quite well, actually.
So John, tell us first, how'd you wind up at the CIA? I can't imagine there were a lot of women there when you began.
I married into the CIA. I was in Europe and dating this wonderful young man, and we ended up getting married in Switzerland. And I found out he was CIA 3 days before I married him, after I had said yes.
Oh,
he was a very a strategic guy.
So wait, what's that like to find out 3 days before the marriage that the guy you're about to marry has that kind of job?
Well, I was from Wichita, Kansas, and I didn't really know what the CIA was back then. I mean, I wasn't schooled in it.
What did your husband Tony tell you? He was a car salesman, or what was he telling you?
That was my first husband. Oh. Tony Mendez was quite another story.
Yeah, but what did he tell you before he told you he was with the CIA? What job did he allegedly have when he was dating you and seducing you?
We were in Europe. We were in Germany, actually, and it was late 60s, and the American military presence in Europe was amazing. There was military everywhere, and he said he was a civilian working with the military.
Oh, okay.
Of course he was.
That's a good one.
Okay, so the disguise department of the CIA, what is it?
Well, CIA has a larger office. Disguise is just part of it. It's called the Office of Technical Service, and that was the Q. We were the technical arm to the intelligence community. No matter what you wanted to do, if you needed a piece of gear or equipment, if we had one, we would give it to you. If we didn't have one, we'd probably invent it for you. I mean, we had chemists and physicists and engineers and people that specialized in such small things that you wouldn't believe you could make a profession.
Well, give us an example of a couple of those things.
Batteries. We had a man who spent his entire career on batteries, who I thought George was strange. George was so forgetful that at CIA, when you close your office at the end of the day, you have to put things in burn bags. You have to put the burn bags down a chute. You have to lock files. Well, George never did any of that. This is the battery guy. He couldn't manage that, and so he kept getting security violations. So what we did with George is we moved his office into a vault. Oh. And all he had to do was close the door when he left every day, and he was good. But George, years later, I found out, George had this blonde hair that looked like he was walking in a wind when he was just standing talking to you. And he wore stripes and plaids and white socks and black sandals. He was a genius, was the thing. Years later, I discovered that at CIA there are 4 schools of excellence. There's the operational school, admin school. The Science and Technology School is the George Methley School, and it was to have a school, one of 4 at CIA, named after you, was such an honor.
We're talking to Jana Mendez. Her latest is In True Face, A Woman's Life in the CIA Unmasked.
I just want to mention, because these are some of the things that I read, that you were able to make quick change license plates, jacket buttons that were compasses, silk jacket linings that were actually maps. You put bugs in books, cameras, as I said earlier, in cigarette packs, and strap-on pregnancy bellies. I mean, this is incredible. I mean, it certainly is. And as I also said, cameras everywhere, it seems.
You left out the cyanide in
the
fountain
cyanide
pen.
Oh, well, you did tell an incredible story, a very sad story, actually, about one of your husband's dear friends, a colleague in the CIA, and a cyanide pill. Tell us that story.
Actually, that was his code name was Trigon. He was a Russian. We wanted him to work for us. He wanted to work for us, but he knew if he got caught, they'd kill him. So he said, I'll work for you if you will give me an L pill. That's a lethal pill. I want to have that. If they're going to come after me, I want to have this back door that I can, choose when I die. And so they arrested him. And
the Russians
did. And he said, I'll write my confession, but I want my pen. So sometimes our pens had cameras in them. Sometimes they had L pills in them. So they brought him the pen. They didn't know either one of those. And he just bit down on the cap. We had milled it out, so it was paper thin. And the Russians said he was dead when he hit the floor.
So he died within seconds?
Within seconds. And we were so sorry because he was a great man.
John Mendez, let's talk about disguise for a second. My understanding from you is that the typical disguise you created, masks, etc., you'd test them out in the cafe at the CIA. Essentially, you'd send people downstairs to sit or spend time with people who would know them to see if it works. I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in this. There was a president not too long ago who was head of the CIA in his former life and ultimately vice president, became president of the United States. And you had a meeting with him and some others, and you decided with your colleagues that you would go to meet with this guy, the President of the United States, in disguise. Can you tell us the whole story about this George H.W. Bush encounter?
Sure. You don't get to go to the Oval Office. In my whole large office of over 1,000 people, only 3 of us had ever been there. The second one was my husband, Tony Mendez, of Argo fame. Tony said, when you go in the Oval Office, make sure you know which door you're using. Because he said, I know there are at least 3 doors there. One of them is the way out, the other one is the way to the broom closet, and the third one is the way to the dining room. And the third person in our office, when he left, had walked into the broom closet and stood there thinking, what's the best way out of this? So going in, I was really nervous about making sure I had my exit marked. I went in, and who was there? John Sununu, Bob Gates, Brent Scowcroft was there.
Wow.
Dan Quayle was not there because he was late to the meeting. He came tiptoeing in at the end, and he missed everything.
And by the way, Governor Sununu was then Chief of Staff to the President of the United States.
Yes, he was.
Yeah.
It was the morning meeting. It was quite something. So I was wearing a full face mask.
No. So go back to the thinking for a second. Why did you even decide to go in disguise to see the President of the United States?
I didn't. I was head of CIA when we developed this full face animated mask. The first one that I wore was an African American man. I was a man, and I was great. I make a good man. But then we talked about the Secret Service, and I was going to have to go through Secret Service to get into the White House. And we decided that I would go into the White House as a woman, but a different woman.
Becky, your coworker, right?
Becky, she left for California, and she gave me her face.
Okay, literally?
Yeah.
Okay, so you go as Becky, and what is the point? Why are you going in disguise to see the President of the United States?
Just to show him how good we had gotten, to show him the latest, the best thing that we could ever do. We were working with Hollywood at the time, and they were making masks. They were making stunt double masks. They were using masks for a variety of reasons and starting to do CGI kinds of masks. Hollywood could not believe what we made, which was one piece that you could drive into a parking garage and in total darkness put this thing on. And it had a registration point because it only fit you. And you could feel it. It almost clicked into place. And you knew in the dark, it's good. I can walk out of here wearing this.
Okay, so you're in the Oval Office as Becky. What happens?
So I showed the president, I had a folder of pictures of him in disguise when he had run the CIA. I said, you'll remember what it's like to wear a disguise. And he's laughing, and that was fun. That really looked good. He liked the pictures. So I said, I'm here to show you what we're doing now, which is much better than what we were doing then. I said, I'm wearing it, and I'll take it off and show it to you. And he said, no, stop, whoa. He said, let me look. So he got up, and he walked, and he's walking around me, and he didn't know what he was looking for. maybe he thought I had on a fake nose. I mean, I don't know, but he was looking maybe for a seam. Like if she's wearing, is there an edge?
But he couldn't tell until you said it.
Of course not.
How nervous were you?
At that point I was not nervous. I was nervous before I went in there, but it's like going on stage, I guess. You know your lines. You almost wrote this scenario, so I wasn't nervous in the Oval Office.
And then you take your mask off?
And then he sat down and he said, okay, take it off. So I did the Tom Cruise thing. Should be called the John Mendez thing. I took it off and I'm holding it up in the air to show him that it's nothing. It's like air. It's light and I heard the photographer in the room, a female, taking pictures. And there's always a photographer in the Oval Office. So I was the first one to brief, and I was the first one to leave. He loved it. He just sparkled. If that man had sparkled like that when he was running the second time, he would have gotten a lot more votes. So I went to the outer office, and I'm playing with the dog and the puppies, because Millie had puppies, and the photographer came out and said, what did you do? And I said, well, you saw it. I heard you taking pictures. She said, yeah, but what was that? And I said, I can't tell you, it's classified. And so it took me 10 years to get the picture. Picture's in the book. But I didn't get a picture for 10 years. And the picture that was sent to me, they airbrushed the mask out of my hand.
Yeah.
So the picture in my library, I'm sitting in front of the president in the Oval Office. My hand is in the air. They left my finger. It looks like I'm giving him a piece of my mind.
Great story.
And my friends would say, oh my God, what were you saying to him? And the answer is, I can't talk about it. It's classified.
We're talking to John Mendez. It's called In True Face, her latest book.
So tell us a little bit about your husband. Lots of people saw the movie Argo. Ben Affleck played your husband, Tony Mendez. Didn't it win the Academy Award for Best Picture?
Yes, it did.
Yes, it did.
But tell us what Tony Mendez, for those who don't know, did back in Tehran in 1979, 1980.
Tehran, back in '79, had a revolution. Up to that time, there were a number of Americans living, visiting. Everybody loved it, and they kind of loved Americans back. But then the Shah of Iran kind of pushed them to the edge, and the Ayatollah came in from Paris, and there was a revolution, and they overran the American embassy in Tehran, and they took a bunch of hostages. 6 people escaped out a back door. They went. They were hiding. They ended up in the ambassador. The Canadian ambassador took them in. He's hiding 6 American hostages, civilians, not spies, not anything. They're just 6 innocent Americans. They got stuck there. And Jimmy Carter was president, and he was trying to figure out how to rescue 6 people in the middle of a revolution. And they had all kinds of plans, and they tried a variety of things. They sent in a group of helicopters that were refueling in the desert. They were going to go in. They were going to go to a football stadium. We had made disguised uniforms. We had disguised the trucks that were going to...
Wow.
We had flown planes into the desert to put blue landing lights. And now I have to cough. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Take
Go
your
ahead.
time. We're talking to Jonna Mendez. Her book is In True Face, A Woman's Life in the CIA Unmasked. Take it away, Jonna. Oh, she has one more cough, and then the headset goes back on. By the way, get the book. We're just going to touch on a bunch of the stories, but it is spectacular. You okay?
I am. So what Tony
Take it
did, Tony said, I'll go get them. He said, I was the last person in there. I know how it works. So he needed a cover organization. He needed a story. He went to Hollywood. He opened a studio. He called it Studio 6. Michael Douglas had just vacated these offices. Tony Mendez, CIA, moved in. They made cards. They made signs for the door. Studio 6. Called it Studio 6 because they were going to go rescue 6 people. My husband had a sense of humor. Tony said later, and this all worked. He got them out. Yeah. It was a very wildly successful operation. He had to walk through an airport with guns out, and it was a dangerous, successful operation. afterwards, when he would talk to people about it, about the danger and about how did you have to come up with that. And Tony said the hardest part of the Argo rescue was not the rescue. He said the hardest part was taking what looked like a silly story. We're going to open up a production company in LA, signs, ads in the trade papers. Incredible. We are big full-page ads, a movie, Argo. We're going to say we're making that movie, and we're going to document those people as the film crew from the fake movie, and that's how they got them out.
What'd you two do for excitement? We're talking to John Mendes. John, we were talking to national security expert Julia Kayyem a minute ago, and we were talking about how Dawn dishwashing liquid was used to seal the doors. And as you were walking by me, you mentioned Dawn liquid. What's your connection to the substance?
We used a lot of Dawn liquid in our disguise labs. And who knew that Boeing was, responsible for any shortages at the store? We were competing with Boeing, for Pete's sake.
But what? Just as a cleansing thing, or what?
As a release for a lot of the materials, working with latex, working with all kinds of rubbers, with molds. It was a wonderful release.
Yeah, it's very powerful, Dawn liquid. That's been my experience. But tell us about torture training.
I took a course where I took it because I was a traveling technical officer. I traveled a lot. And back then, they were hijacking planes occasionally and shooting Americans. One of the things they taught us, was when you get in the plane, before you do anything, take your identification and hide it in the plane. Put it under the seat, so if it come down the aisle looking for Americans. Anyway, I was in a course for 3 days. They didn't feed us. They put us in cells. They wouldn't let us sleep. They wouldn't let us sit down. They interrogated us. They really, really pushed you. Before the course really began, they said, is there anything we should know? I mean, we don't want to hurt people. Is there anything we should know? And I said, well, I am claustrophobic. So they put me in boxes.
Oh, my God.
They put me in a box that was like being in a mattress box. I mean, you would imagine that that's what was in here before. Now I'm in here. You couldn't move your shoulders. And they closed it, so it's pitch black dark. You're standing, you can't sit. We had some prisoners of war come in and talk to that course, and they were talking about being POWs in Vietnam and how they managed long-term incarceration. What do you do? And they said, well, some people play chess, some people rebuild the motors of their cars. I mean, it's a mind game. You have to somehow find your way out of that situation. So I thought, okay, I'm in the mattress box. And what got me out of my head and able to get through that scenario was to envision the tall grass prairies back in Kansas where I had escaped. I always laughed and said I was an escapee from Kansas. And that was the thing. That's where I went, and I could manage it. It was like you had on infrared goggles. It was all green. It was a landscape, but I could be in that landscape. It was amazing.
John Mendes from In True Faces, the latest terrific book. When a police commissioner, we've had a number of them on through the years, come with us, the first show that they're on, we almost always say, so what do you think of the cop television shows? Which ones are real? Which ones are not? I loved Homeland. I loved The Americans even more. Maybe the greatest ending to any show in TV history. Did either of them get it right?
I was walking through the International Spy Museum in an area where it's all cubicles and you can't see people. Mm-hmm. And someone said, the Washington Post wants a review for the final episode of The Americans. Who's watching The Americans? And I said, I am. So I got to write the final review. But the joke was that I had just started watching it. I had to sit and watch 6 years of The Americans. I didn't know. In like 3 weeks. And then I wrote a wonderful review because I really loved that show. That show, the home life, those kids, that neighbor, the FBI guy next door. It was
the husband was doing disguises all the time. And was that close to real?
Yes, he was
great.
Perfect. Kerry Washington, they just kept putting a new wig on her. She was always beautiful. But now she's a beautiful brunette and then a beautiful blonde. That wasn't working, but he would put on that mousy wig and say, "Hello, Martha."
So
it was fabulous.
So, John Mendes, we a lot of us anyway have lost confidence in our government. A lot of people have lost confidence in Congress, and a lot of Americans don't like their choices for president and stuff. How should we feel about the CIA in 2024? You still think they're up to the job, up to taking on the Russians, up to taking on anybody else they might have to take on?
I gave a book talk last night at Mike Morell's. His wife has opened a bookshop. He was the deputy director of CIA not so terribly long ago. I think the CIA is in good hands. I think it came kind of close to the edge when Trump was in office. There was a final little denouement going on at the end where Gina Haspel, the head of CIA, was at the White House. She had just done the president's daily brief. McConnell came out of the Oval and said, "Gina, he's thinking about firing your deputy. He's going to let him go." And Gina Haspel, this is all, I wasn't there, but the story is that she stood up and said, "I want to go back in." And the people that know her told me she was going to quit. She was going to tell him, Trump, if he did that, she was going to leave. And that was what it took for him to back down. He changed his mind. McConnell came back out and said he's changed his mind. But his idea was to put Kash Patel.
Oh, yes.
To replace the deputy to Gina as acting deputy. And then all that was between him and the end was to fire Gina. And then the acting deputy could become the acting director with no congressional oversight at all. That's where I think that was going. Scared me to death.
So you're worried about Trump getting back in the Oval Office, I assume?
Aren't we all?
Yeah.
Well put. John, I want to say a couple of things. One, Zoe, who is our number 2 producer, has her day off. And generally when people have a day off on our show, they want nothing to do with it.
Yeah.
Is sitting in her driveway having a driveway moment. She cannot move, listening to you.
Hi, Zoe.
And a listener and the number have said the same thing. Is there any amount of groveling that I can do to get a ticket to see John Mendes at the Athenaeum? I just look, you're there not just... you're there. Wait, are you there tonight at 6 o'clock? Right?
Yeah.
Are there tickets left? Do we know?
I understood it was sold out, but if it was me, I'd make a phone call. You never know.
Make a phone
you never
call
know.
or go to Boylston Athenaeum, and Margie will tell you how to spell it in a minute. .org. Your book is great, and you're unbelievable. Thank you so much for the time. We really appreciate it.
And I've been mispronouncing it the whole time.
Athenaeum.
Yeah, now I got it.
How do you call it?
Athenaeum.
That's close
okay.
enough.
I mispronounce everything, so we're in good company here. Hey, thank you so much. The book is, and if we only got to 1/100th of this. I mean, a million great
that
stories.
Scene, let me just say.
With Bush?
With the terrorist. No,
the terrorist. We didn't get to that.
Eyes,
eye to eye.
Read the book. When the terrorist locks eyes with you, I was like vibrating reading this damn thing. Read the book. There are a million great stories, and we're thrilled to have you.
The book is In True Face, A Woman's Life in the CIA, Unmasked. The author that we've been speaking to, of course, who wrote this book about her years at the CIA is Jana Mendes, former chief of disguise for the CIA. Thank you very much for coming in. And if you want to try to get in to see her tonight at the Boston Athenaeum, more information is at events.bostonathenaeum.org, and I'm going to spell it for you. Athen. It's like Athen with no S, and then AEUM. Athenaeum.org. Thank you very much, John Mendes, for coming in.
Great to meet you. Good luck. Take care.
After a quick break, it is time for Live Music Friday at the Boston Public Library. We'll hear from a family band led by the co-owners of perhaps the most beloved and famed Irish pub in America, the Burn in Davis Square in Somerville. Live music next. You're listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7.
It's about reparations.
This is not going to happen unless people who currently object to the idea of reparations or are indifferent to it change their point of view.
But how could the federal government develop a plan to accomplish this? And what lessons could the U.S. learn from other governments that have already made it past that point?
We have, as Austrians, a co-responsibility in the Nazi crimes.
From GBH News, I'm Soraya Wintersmith. This is What Is Owed.
Available wherever you get your podcasts.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you.
And the University of Massachusetts Amherst Mount Ida campus in Newton, connecting students and employers in Greater Boston and offering on-campus graduate and pre-college programs. Learn more at umass.edu/Mount Ida campus. And Seasons 4, the outdoor living store on Mass Ave in Lexington, featuring over 100 styles of contemporary and traditional outdoor furniture, plus a wide selection of plants, statuary, and garden accessories. Seasons4.com.
Trusted. Local. News. You're listening to 89.7 WGBH, HD1 Boston, online at gbhnews.org. GBH News with NPR. What matters to you.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. I'm Marjorie Egan and Jim Bradley. We're live at the library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News, facebook.com/GBH News. Friday, when we're back, Broadway legend Patti LuPone, who was the first person to play Evita, is going to zoom in, and in person will be 4 performers from Girl from the North Country, which is the Tony Award-winning musical written around the songs of Bob Dylan. And speaking of music, it is time for a wonderful special Wednesday live music segment. Our good friend and late colleague, Brian O'Donovan, used to music venue, the Burren. Great to see you, Tommy. Thanks for being here. Which, by the way, was just named one of the top 3 Irish bars in America by the Travel Channel. Obviously, they got screwed. And here, a familiar face to us, the wonderful Lindsay O'Donovan, who's been beautifully carrying on the legacy of the beautiful late husband, Brian, including in the concerts we're going to talk about in a minute. They're here in part to promote a string of St. Patrick's Day shows this Friday and Saturday. They're calling it the St. Patrick's Day Special Variety Dinner Show. 12 shows from Friday to Sunday of food and music. For tickets, go to Burren, BURREN.com. Tommy, Lindsay, it's great to see you both. Thanks so much for being here.
Thanks, Jim. Yeah, thank you so much. We heard you this morning, and we are in for a real treat here. But Lindsay, I want to start with you. Tell us about the Legacy series. What exactly is this?
Well, about 11 or 12 years ago, I think it was the fall of 2011, Brian and I were traveling in Ireland and met up with Tommy and decided that it would be great to have a concert series at the back room of the Burren. And it just kind of started with that. Brian and Tommy kind of put the whole thing together, and with Louise and myself, and we just all made it happen. And the series just kind of grew and became a wonderful kind of regular thing. And then when Brian passed away, we decided it was called Brian O'Donovan Presents. And then we decided to call it the Brian O'Donovan Legacy series because it is carrying on what he started with Tommy. And we've got a lot of amazing music. Tommy will tell you more about that.
Yeah. Before you tell us about that, what did you think of Brian O'Donovan the first time you met him?
I loved Brian from the first moment I met himself and Lindsay when I first came to America in about 1986 in the Canadian American Hall in Watertown, and I think Aoife was only about 2 and Aidan wasn't much older. But we had a good connection because Brian spent a summer in England, in London, and I spent a lot of my life there when I was a kid, and my father used to play in a pub there called The Favourite. And Brian used to frequent there every Sunday. And when I met him in Boston years later, he was telling me about it, and he said it was the first time he actually captured the atmosphere of a pub of immigrants on a Sunday afternoon, talking about home, having a pint, and with music going on in the background. Because where Brian's from in Clonakilty, at that time, it wasn't really well known to have traditional Irish music in a session atmosphere in a pub, like it would be in County Galway or West Clare.
You know, I admitted to Brian, and you heard this, I'm sure, I couldn't stand Irish music until I met Brian. And then I tolerated it because we had to have him on our show. And then all of a sudden, I went to one of your shows. I didn't like the dancing either. I love that. I love the music. It's hard. I mean, you're biased, obviously. The impact your husband had, not just on the explosion of Irish music on this side of the ocean, but on live music in general, was immense.
Oh, thanks, Jim. I mean, it really kind of made
And you too, by the way. I didn't mean to leave. I mean, you were a couple in every single way, but he was huge.
Well, he enjoyed it. It was really, he never viewed it as a job. He viewed it as his passion, and sadly, he didn't live to do it into old age, but I think that he wanted to go to work. He wanted to just be creating and making more music.
Well, tell us, Tommy, you started to, but what else is going on over there at the Burn involving the Legacy series?
Well, outside what myself and Brian started, we branched out about 10 years ago with a good friend of ours called Tom Bianchi, who starts this roots kind of music. And it's developed into children's shows, matinees, to kids want to be rock stars when they're 14. And they go down the Burn on a Saturday afternoon, and there's like kids downstairs in the dressing room putting gel in their hair and their Telecaster guitar. And then their grandparents and their parents are all in the audience with their video cameras. So it's a whole community.
Looks like you put a little gel in yours this morning there, Tommy. Yeah?
I just came from the YMCA.
Okay, fine. Okay.
It's chloride.
So what specifically, though, is going to happen this weekend? What are people going to be entertained by?
Well, about 10 years ago, myself and Louise were playing in the front bar around the session.
Your wife?
Yeah, Louise, my wife's from Galway. You're going to hear great music in a while. My daughter Rose and Pat, my nephew. We were playing in the front room, and it was St. Patrick's Day. You know, St. Patrick's Day generally is like pack them all in and take all the furniture out. And I was like, this isn't right. So we decided to start a variety show because people were coming in, and some people had Zimmer frames, and some people had little babies. And I was like, let's try and give everybody a seat here and then provide their dinner. So it's a part of the show. So you pay $30, you watch us perform for an hour. And then you have your dinner, you get your shamrock cake, and you have a good time, and then we put them all out the back room. We do it all over 12 times over the weekend, and people are happy.
Wow.
Yeah, it's
okay.
great.
So we're going to hear some music?
Yep.
What's the first song? What are you playing?
We're going to play a tune called Fanny Power, and Fanny Power was a piece of music composed by the great harpist called Carolyn. He travelled around Ireland in the 1700s to big state homes, manor homes, play music for the dinner party. But this particular music was composed for a wedding, and it was the first dance. And her name was Frances Power, but she got the name Fanny Power, but I don't know if anyone calls their daughter Fanny these days.
Yeah,
before you put your headsets down, first of all, you two are playing with your family.
Yeah.
Tommy, tell people what instruments all five of you are playing, if you would.
I play the fiddle. Louise, my wife, is playing the banjo and the accordion. My daughter's playing the fiddle, and my nephew, Pat Giles, is playing the uilleann pipes.
How about that Lindsay woman? What's she playing?
And she's going to play the piano. Myself and Lindsay were in a band together.
I know that.
Many years ago.
How'd that go?
It was great. She was at one end, I was at the other end. But the kids were so young that time. She'd come in and she'd focus on the other mothers talking about their kids. So I was just standing like a 19-year-old. Like, I don't know much.
Can you
about
put your
kids.
headsets gently down on the table and join your family? And we're really looking forward to it.
Fanny Power was actually our wedding processional. That's
that
what we
so?
walked down the aisle. Yeah.
Oh, that is
it just dawned on me.
that
Wow,
is
this is like
beautiful.
incredible.
That's
what we're
really
going
beautiful.
to
That's what we're going to hear.
now?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
That is
okay.
great.
We're talking with Tommy McCarthy, co-owner of the
That's
famed
great.
Davis Square Pub, the Burn, and music venue there, of course, was just named, as Jim said, one of the top Irish bars in the United States by the Travel Channel, and a familiar face to us here, Lindsay O'Donovan, who's been carrying on the legacy of her late husband, Brian, whom we all adored.
You know, we said that live music's where it's at, which was the calling card for Brian. But I mean, the thing he taught me, in addition to being a generous, wonderful, funny, brilliant human being, great storyteller, is live music is where it's at. And it's not just Irish music. It's just sitting there and watching the players perform, it changes everything. In any case, here they are.
Tommy McCarthy, his wife Rose, daughter Louise, Peter McCarthy on fiddles, accordion, and I hope I pronounce this right, Uilleann pipes. Is that right?
I think so, but I would ask Tommy if I were you.
Yeah, we're going to ask Tommy.
They're
when he gets
coming back
here.
up.
They're coming back here. And they got a bunch of St. Patrick's Day shows this Friday and Saturday at the Burn. They're calling it the St. Patrick's Day Special Variety Dinner Show. Is it Uilleann Pipes? Is that how you say it?
Uilleann Pipes, yeah.
Well, I was close enough. I was sort of close
Do you
enough.
like playing with your family? I mean, you have that experience for a lifetime, too. Tommy, is that...
Well, I have two family bands. I have three sisters that I'm in a band with as well. So I was in England most of the summer with them, and then I have this band here as well. We've been touring together since they were in school and kids, so around Australia and everywhere. So when most people go off to Bermuda on holidays, we'll go off to New Zealand and play house concerts.
Yeah, so I have a question about the Irish dancers. I've always seen the Irish dancers in your shows. I'm Irish, but I've always thought that really what we're looking at is the nuns and the Catholics. You can move nothing but your feet. Isn't that what it's really about? You can't move your hands, you can't move your hips, you can't move anything but your feet. What do you think of that?
That was a good answer, I think, to a troubling question. I think they're choosing to ignore that.
It's a little unusual, isn't it?
I'll give you a little story. About 10 or 15 years ago, I got an opportunity to invite her to Michael Flatley's house in West Cork. And we came to the gates, and they were the size of this ceiling here in front of us. And then we drove in around like this, and we got to his house, and there was a big, massive man. There was a Rolls Royce parked in the driveway, and a kind of a sports car. And Matt, my wife, and the chieftains was with me. And I just looked at him and says, "How could somebody make so much money out of Irish dancing?" Because I gave it up when I was 8 years of age. My mother made me wear a kilt. I was like,
"Oh no!" Well, it is.
So I guess the message is somebody likes it a lot.
No, well,
Marjorie.
people do like it a lot. It's very popular. They have they do it in Boston, right? There's tons of places, but I think West Roxbury has a big, huge contingent of Irish dancers. They're all over the place.
School of dancing is everywhere. It's all over the world.
But I can't help think of Sister Mary Aloysia every time I see it.
I think you'd give it up, Marjorie. By the way, we made a mistake. The shows are Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Is that correct?
That's correct, yeah.
Friday is sold out. Is that right? So it's Saturday and Sunday. Tickets are available at burn.com.
There's a lot of them sold out, actually, Jim. There's only about 2 shows not sold out.
So get on really quickly at burn.com. Legacy Fund. We talked about legacies here. What's the Legacy Fund?
Well, the Legacy Fund is something that before Brian died, we established over at Club Passim, and he was really excited about it. And it's a fund that has gotten a lot of wonderful donations, and our goal with it and hope is that it will encourage and be there as a basis for Celtic musicians and crossover musicians, meaning musicians trying to explore Celtic music with a different type of music, like maybe doing a project on that. It'll be something that they can delve into and use it for a project or really just about anything.
So how do people find out about it or make contributions? What do they do?
That's at Club Passim. I think it's clubpassim.org, and it's the Brian O'Donovan Legacy Fund for Celtic Music.
Tommy, while people celebrate your place for a variety of reasons, it's really sad when a music venue closes. I'm sure you both agree. You may have heard of this place, Toad, in Cambridge, a shutdown. Do you have any idea? I mean, you're in the music business. Do you have any idea what happened to that place, or if it ever might reopen, or you don't know?
Well, how much time do you have?
Enough to get an answer.
The owners, Christopher, Charlie, and his wife, Holly, approached me there last October. That they had put it on the market, and some cash buyer was going to buy it, and they said, I don't know what happened. The deal fell through, so they met with me, and we were in the process of buying it.
You're the new owners.
We're going to be the new owners.
That's great.
Yeah.
What are you going to do?
We're going to keep...
That does deserve applause, by the way. This is really... I think it's huge. What are you going to do in places?
We're going to keep the Toad as it is, and we're going to change Christopher's to McCarthy's.
Of course.
Christopher was the man who had it before, so he was a bit concerned about his name continuing on in case we start playing Irish music then.
So when are you hoping to open?
We're hoping to close on, we're just going through the permitting phase at the moment. So we'll have the keys in May, and then we'll work on it for the summer and open it in September.
That's
Everybody's back from vacation.
Congratulations.
But we also have another place up the road here called the Bebop, which is in the heart of Berklee College of Music. So that's that's going great, and it gives an opportunity for all the students to come in and play every day of the week and night of the week or whatever. So
That's great.
Tommy, you mentioned that there wasn't, when you first came here, a lot of Irish music. I was up at Rockport at the great Celtic, what is it called, the Celtic Festival? It's every...
Rockport Celtic Festival,
Rockport,
yeah.
which was unbelievable. And it does seem like it has hugely picked up.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like when I came here first, 1986, the only place that had music that time was the Village Coaches,
Yeah. Brian and I met there.
where they
Yeah.
met.
Yeah.
And then there was an older crowd that time. Well, the older, they were already 40 and 50. I was only 18 and 19 at the time. And I heard about a pub over in Alston called the Kinvara, and I went in there, and Louise was there, and that's how we started playing music. And then we started playing sessions around town, because that time most of the music was on stage, like the Black Rose. So we started the session scene.
Like
And
they
then-
have in pubs in Ireland, where you
Yeah.
walk in and there's people just sitting around there
Exactly.
playing.
So we thought there was a need for that, so we kept at it, and that's how we kind of started the Burren 28 years ago, you know.
So you guys are going to play again, Tommy, in a second. You'll tell us. But I want to say something to you. I know I speak for Marjorie. When someone we're all close to dies, everybody says the mandatory, he or she is never going to be forgotten. And sadly, too often they are forgotten, except by people close to them. I was going to raise my right hand. There is almost not a day at GBH where your husband's name does not come up. It might be on the air, it might be in a hallway, it might even be in the men's room. But Brian O'Donovan made a mark that is just so huge and so important. And I know how you and your kids feel about him personally, but for those of us who are not lucky enough to be related to him, he changed a lot of lives. He really made a big difference.
Thanks so much for saying that. I think it's true. And he certainly, like I said, he loved his colleagues at GBH and his colleagues in the Irish music and all the music that he worked with. And, you know, he did leave a mark. And
We felt it.
we feel strongly about carrying it on.
Well, you're doing it beautifully. So what are you going to play for us now, Tommy?
Well, Jim and Margie, we're going to finish off a little tune dedicated to Brian called The Rolling Wave.
Oh, great.
Okay,
The Rolling Wave.
The Rolling Wave. Okay. We're listening to Tommy McCarthy, his wife Rose, Louise, and Peter McCarthy on fiddles, accordion,
Uline. That's
Thank
close
you,
enough. They know what
pipes.
we mean.
And Lindsay O'Donovan, who was married for, I think, 42 years to Brian O'Donovan, our great colleague.
And we should say, we just heard only a couple of shows of the 12 still have
Yep.
tickets. So get in quickly. Burren, BURREN.com. Thank you so much.
To the family band of Tommy McCarthy, owner of the legendary Somerville pub, The Burren, as well as Lindsay Donovan on the piano, and the Tommy McCarthy band is Tommy, his wife Rose, daughter Louise, Peter Giles on fiddles, and of course, Lindsay O'Donovan on the piano. Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
And the
That was really
Uilleann
great.
pipes, which I
Thank you
keep
so much.
mispronouncing. Thank you so much for
Cancer Center, whose discovery of bone marrow transplants has saved over 1 million lives worldwide. You can learn how this and other breakthroughs impact the world at fredhutch.org/lookbeyond.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Marjorie Egan. We're live at the Boston Public Library, streaming at youtube.com/GBHnews, facebook.com/GBHnews. As happy as Marjorie was listening to the music, it pales next to the fact when she walked over to the band and Tommy yelled out, "I've got a bag full of mashed potatoes for you." Marjorie glowed like this woman never glows.
I tell you.
You want to impress her? Bring her mashed potatoes. In any case, we're joined now on Zoom by CNN Chief National Correspondent John King. He's host of All Over the Map and the Battleground Reporting Projects, tracking the 2024 campaign that is now in full swing through the eyes and experiences of voters who will pick the next president. John, it's great to see you. Thanks for joining us.
I'm glad to be here. That last segment was fantastic, and yeah, I'm a Dorchester kid, but I've emptied a few pints at the Kinvara.
Yeah.
I left defective glasses. Every time I got a pint, it was suddenly empty, and I had to get another.
Yeah, but John King, much more important, are you with me in the mashed potatoes, or are you with me in the mashed potatoes? Absolutely.
Absolutely.
That's the most mashed potatoes I've ever seen in one place. I'm sorry, John. Go ahead.
No, it's just fine. It's just listening to that. Number one, it just brings me home to the great Irish traditions there. But number two, I've been blessed. I've been taking a few trips to Ireland over the past year and a half, and I got to hike the Burren, which is the limestone area that the bar is named after. And I got to meet that's in County Clare. When I was in Connemara, which is where my grandfather's from, I got to meet Bill Whalen, who's the musician and the composer behind Riverdance.
Oh my gosh!
And it was just it's a breathtaking gift. So I was having a great day. You guys could have kept going. You could have canceled my time and kept going. I would have listened to the music and just been a fan.
Well, they were fabulous.
It's some very important news to get you with you, John King. First of all, the primary. The primaries yesterday. We have the presumptive nominees, as we know, but we had Haley getting a significant vote in Georgia. So what's the takeaway? What do we think?
Yeah, I think to that point, look, we have our two presumptive nominees very early. They're not official till the conventions, but for all the people out there who keep thinking it's not going to be a Biden-Trump rematch, I think it is. I think it's pretty clear that it is. Look, both of these candidates have great strengths, and they both have some pretty glaring weaknesses that have been exposed in these primary runs where, President Biden's getting 97% of the delegates. Trump's getting 93% of the delegates. Both of those will go up as you go through the later primaries where there's no real opposition. But for former President Trump, as you noted, Nikki Haley running still, even though she's out of the race, and some of these votes were cast early, so let's not overplay it. But the suburbs remain a problem for Donald Trump, without a doubt. And so in a lot of the suburban areas and then the coastal areas where you have more moderate, more affluent, upscale people who used to be sort of your Bush Republicans, who are now increasingly Democrats, but available to Republicans. They just don't like Trump. He's got a problem there. He has a problem there. Now, the president of the United States has problems, too, which is why he's in Michigan and Wisconsin over the next couple of days trying to shore up his base. But if you look at, how do you get to 270? How do you win these battleground states? They both have big issues. And I would add this lastly. A lot of people want to immediately get to gaming out state by state in November. We can do that. Sometimes it's instructive, but sometimes let's be careful. 8 months is a long time. Trump has to pick a running mate. We don't know if there'll be one or two Trump trials by then. Plus, I think a giant factor is which of the third-party candidates get ballot access in which of the battleground states. Because if you have two or three third-party candidates on the ballot in Michigan and Wisconsin and Georgia and Arizona, knowing how close the last Trump-Biden race was, I think that has the potential to make a huge difference.
Well, speaking of third-party candidates, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., several people have turned him down, but he's recently approached NFL quarterback Aaron Rodgers. He used to be with the Green Bay Packers, didn't he?
He's now with the Jets.
New York Jets. I guess he got hurt badly last year. But
he's an anti-vaccine mandate guy.
Anti-vaccine, but a big hero in the NFL. I think he was the most valuable player a bunch of times. And then professional wrestler, or former professional wrestler, Jesse Ventura, who used to be the governor of Minnesota, is his vice presidential candidate. Does this help RFK Jr. or what?
Look, I don't think RFK Jr. is going to be the next president of the United States,
right.
But I do think, go back to 2016 and look at Jill Stein and Gary Johnson in Michigan, for example, Hillary Clinton to this day, and the math is on her side, says that's why she lost Michigan, maybe why she lost Wisconsin to the third-party candidates. And so, if you subscribe to the theory that in a lot of places Trump can get to 46 or 47, but he can't get to 50, the third-party candidates are going to matter. As for who Robert F. Kennedy would pick, number one, he has to get on the ballots. That's the super PAC that's helping him says he's on the ballot in a number of the battleground states. I have no reason to doubt them. It has not been certified yet by those states. So we have to wait and make sure it's official. And then, so if a vice presidential candidate, I've made this argument to you guys before, I think it matters a little bit more this year. There's no history that says that's how people vote. There just isn't. But the Republican's going to run against Kamala Harris because of President Biden's age. So I think that does put a little bit more onus on Trump and who he picks. And so I suppose if you're looking at a third-party candidate, to your point about Aaron Rodgers being anti-vax and also somebody who peddles in a lot of the conspiracy theories that Robert F. Kennedy Jr. peddles in, I guess that would be a reinforcement. If it's Jesse Ventura, who did make history as an independent Reform Party candidate, winning a governorship. Remember, that was after Perot when we thought the third-party thing was going to take off in the United States, and it didn't. Robert Kennedy and Jesse Ventura would be another ticket of 70-year-old plus men. Is that what America wants? I'm going to go out on a limb and say probably not.
Well, they're young by comparison, actually. So maybe that is right. The stunning numbers that you posted last night, I hope I get these right, but I know you'll correct me if I'm wrong. When you mentioned Jill Stein before, was it Michigan? She got, did I get this right, 50,000 votes? I had totally forgotten. And Hillary Clinton lost the state by 10. Are those numbers right?
That's right.
That is so for those who are just discounting this third-party thing.
No, I think it's a real problem.
Ralph Nader, Jill Stein, whatever, RFK. And you touch on a point that I was almost too embarrassed to raise, but since you went into vice president land, I'm going to go. The first time in my lifetime that I'm fairly confident I thought the vice president mattered was with John McCain, not just because Palin was such a polarizing figure, but because John McCain had health issues. So you thought about it. Obviously, a variation on that theme with Biden and Kamala Harris. Here's what I was thinking last night when I was watching you in CNN, John, is that as much as everybody says the only quality that Trump cares about in a vice president is loyalty, it seems to me that there'll be pressure on him to, and I don't mean this as a joke, to pick someone who is not a total lunatic like he is, in the hopes that it will convince people who say they might be leaving him if he's got a criminal conviction. Well, even if he had to leave office because of the conviction, Jane Doe is somebody who I have confidence in. Is that a ridiculous thesis or no? Be honest.
I don't think it's a ridiculous thesis if you look at the idea that, look, Trump is a very impulsive, reflexive, goes with his instincts person, and that sometimes benefits him politically, much to our surprise sometimes, and it sometimes, of course, is a huge detriment and a liability for Donald Trump to be so impulsive. However, when he picked Mike Pence, remember back then, there was talk about Ted Cruz or other people trying to, stir it up at the convention, trying to have a contested convention. He picked Mike Pence, a traditional Christian conservative from Middle America, and it shut all that down. So Trump did make a strategic choice to help himself politically there. So what is his calculation now? Is it that he thinks if he can cut into the black vote? I'm not saying this would work, but if he thinks if he cuts into the black vote a little bit in Milwaukee, a little bit in Detroit, a little bit in Atlanta, that he wins those three big battleground states. So is that Tim Scott?
Yeah.
Right? Again, I'm not saying that would automatically transfer, but that's part. We know that is part of his thinking. That is part of the things he has asked people from reporting. There's a couple of stories out today, the last couple of days, about how he's been asking guests at Mar-a-Lago and other people he talks to about who do they think would be the best. How does abortion sell? Does he pick a vice presidential who helps him? Trump, of course, this is the paradox of Trump, I guess. He appoints the 3 Supreme Court justices who are critical to erasing Roe v. Wade. And yet he thinks that issue is a loser. And he understands his problems in the suburbs. And so he's looking for somebody who is less polarizing, less to the right, I guess, or at least where people think of it less as their issue, right? That this is their flag issue and that you'd worry about this person on abortion rights. So he is clearly, again, like him or not, he is asking what I'll call political and strategic questions about his pick. We'll see where he ends up.
Now, we can assume, I think, that Katie Briss, who gave the response last week to the president's speech, is no longer in the running, or perhaps she is. I mean, she's been kind of ridiculed for her odd speech, but maybe some people like her.
She has been ridiculed for that, and if people haven't seen it, Scarlett Johansson, wow, that was good on Saturday Night Live. It was just
not as good as Katie Britt, but it was good. Yeah.
It's interesting. I don't know Senator Britt well. I know a lot of people who do know her well, who think so highly of her.
Yeah.
Again, she's a Christian conservative Republican. If you don't agree with those politics, then that's, of course, you're right. But she was the chief of staff to Senator Richard Shelby, a former Democrat turned Republican. She's well-versed in the issues of banking and finance and all that. There are a lot of people who think really highly of her as a senator and as someone who does her homework and does the work as a senator and gets along well with her colleagues, who are saying, wow, did she make a huge mistake? Number one, taking that job. It's a thankless role. We could have a long conversation about all the people who've taken that job and been ridiculed and diminished, at least in the short term, diminished politically. She's young. She has plenty of time to recover, but it's been a tough couple of weeks for her. Will Trump pick her after that? Again, I was saying a minute ago that in 2016, and there's some evidence now in 2024, he's asking the right political questions and strategic questions. He's making that kind of a process. But we all know he's into performance. And so if he didn't like that performance, you can see him just saying no way, just based on that, because he's so much about theater and television and performance.
John, can I grasp at straws for a minute? Because that's pretty much what I do, and we do a lot on the show. So if mocking disabled people, Gold Star families, stutterers, that doesn't matter. If being found liable, if you're a rapist, doesn't matter. If you commit massive fraud, doesn't matter. If you're an insurrectionist, doesn't matter. The other day on, I think it was CNBC, Trump said that Social Security was on the table and that cutting Social Security was on the table. And I know his people tried to correct it after the fact. The straw that I'm grasping at is I am assuming that Joe Biden will do his best to have people remember that one comment for the next 8 months, because obviously that matters a lot to a lot of people who are very reliable voters. Is that your sense of this either slip up or whether it was intent, whatever it was, of the comment about Social Security the other day?
Yes. A couple pieces to that. Number one, the first litany you went through. It doesn't matter to Trump's most loyal base, those things.
Yes.
However, that's my point. That's my point, that in many places he can only get to 46 or 47. Right. Because it does matter to enough people. It does matter to enough people. That's why he's a former president of the United States at the moment. It mattered just enough people, but it mattered, in 2020, it mattered to just enough people. So I do think going forward, number one, no doubt, that's going to be, whether it's Biden or Biden's super PAC or other Democratic super PACs, that CNBC interview is going to be in advertisements. It's going to be in mailings. It's going to be in texts to senior citizens and to others who are among the most reliable voters. I have a second question about that, though, Jim, to me, is that, people have asked the question, do we see Donald Trump slipping up at some of these events sometimes? Do we see him wandering, his mind wandering a little bit? And there's no doubt, and again—
Joe Biden, you mean? Joe Biden.
No.
Joe Biden and Donald Trump.
Oh, okay.
Joe Biden and Donald Trump,
okay.
Mixing up Nancy Pelosi and Nikki.
I'm sorry.
Nikki Haley was in charge of the Capitol somehow on January 6th. Look, it's hard to— you guys do a live radio show every day. You always want to grab the crank and pull the words back. They're leaving your tongue.
That is true. Yes.
And you're trying to, as they leave your tongue, you're trying to crank them back in. Well, I have grace for politicians of all stripes and being live performances all the time, that you're going to say things you regret. But Donald Trump is the one who blew up the Paul Ryan traditional Republican paradigm of we need to squeeze, we have to reform. Yeah. And again, a lot of them say reform and keep and protect, and I'm not trying to start the Social Security debate, but that you have to have entitlement reforms or else these programs do go off the rails. Now, what do? Do you raise taxes? Do you raise the retirement age? Do you, means test for rich people? That's a debate the country actually has to have at some point. But Trump has been the one who says no. The fiscal conservative Republicans for years been saying do it, and Trump has said no, 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 and now he says we have to do it. Why would he do that?
I don't know. That's great.
And so to me, it's yes, the Democrats are going to, trust me, use it as a 2x4. But the question for me is, if you're on Trump's staff, it's like, sir, forgive me, but where the hell did that come from?
Talking to John King from CNN.
John King, we talked earlier today with Juliet Kayyem, our national security expert. We were talking about Israel and Gaza and these horrible, horrible reports now of children starving in Gaza, and that it's going to be weeks to get that floating humanitarian aid ship and the pier and all that kind of stuff, by which time it'll be too late for a lot of those children. It seems as though there's some changing. When you hear some Democrats saying we've got to, more than Bernie Sanders saying we can't allow Israel to go into Rafah, and the president being tougher and talking about what we're going to do there. What are the politics? I'm frustrated. I think a lot of people are frustrated because so many Jewish Americans are saying that Israel has gone too far and they don't like this.
Look, this is an intractable challenge of the moment that is wrapped in the intractable challenge of the last 100+ years, but of trying to figure out how can Israel live in peace, or at least in détente, with its neighbors, the Palestinians? How can the Palestinians have rights, a democracy? They have to have a stable government that wants to do that. And so when you have, it's the Israeli perspective is that terrorists run the place. Terrorists are our neighbors. Look what terrorists did to us on October 7th. Perfectly understandable to understand Israel's outrage and Israel's right to want justice. At the same time, you're absolutely right that I don't know that there's an easy way to do this, right? So it's not all like it's not all Israel could have done this and done it more cleanly. It can't. I don't know that it can be done cleanly. I don't pretend to be smart enough to know how you do it more cleanly. But now that we are months into this and you see the horrible humanitarian consequences of this, the politics have shifted to the point that not only are there more Democrats saying, of course we want Hamas out of Gaza. However, you cannot do it. This cannot be the price. This price is too high. Innocent families, innocent children, innocent civilians, people who had little, who now have even less, forced from their homes. And so you see it across the Democratic Party, but you also see it in the President of the United States, who's now saying, I'm sending in, we're going to use our military assets to build essentially a fake port, a temporary port, to bring in more humanitarian aid. You see it in American and Jordanian planes dropping those parachutes of humanitarian aid. And you see it in Netanyahu bristling back. The tensions between Biden, who has been a long time, 40+ years supporter of Israel, are now in public disputes with the prime minister of Israel. And a lot of people in the Biden administration, sort of mumbling quietly that the only solution they see here is one that does not involve Netanyahu. And yet Israel is a democracy and the Israelis have to make that decision. But we've seen in the past when there's been tensions between the United States president and the Israeli government, or the U.S. administration, don't make it so personal, in the Israeli government, what the United States thinks of Israel at the moment does have a significant impact on Israeli politics. Is that true now when the Israelis are legitimately angry, hurt, furious at being attacked by the terrorists the way they were? I don't know. But the open tension between the President of the United States and the Prime Minister of Israel is something to watch closely.
John, I learned a lot from you last night, like I always do. It's great to see you. Thanks for your time today.
Happy St. Patrick's Day. Top of the
Yeah, thank you very, very much. I'm glad you enjoyed the music. It was absolutely terrific. Okay, coming up next, we're going to have a little discussion about a habit that apparently is taking hold across America, where you're getting invited over for dinner at somebody's house, and then they ask you to chip in with cash for the dinner you are hosting. What do you think about this? Is it tacky to ask your friends to pitch in with cash, or maybe Venmo, to a dinner party that you've got the mat already? You are listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH. We're broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library.
I'm Jared Bowen. Coming up on The Culture Show, scientist Mona Mikara spent years thinking of her blindness as something she needed to overcome. Then she realized she could literally explore cultural perceptions about disabilities by launching the travel docuseries titled Planes, Trains, and Canes. She joins us to talk about this and screening her work in an upcoming film festival. That and more on The Culture Show today at 2 on 89.7 GBH.
Support for GBH comes from you.
And Unicare. Unicare is becoming WellPoint. Same doctors, same hospitals, new name, same commitment to you. WellPoint. Claims are administered by WellPoint Life and Health Insurance Company. Unicare.wellpoint.com. And We Clean Heat Pumps, serving the region with cleaning and maintenance of ductless mini-split heat pumps to help purify air and capture mold, dust, and debris as AC season is here. More at WeCleanHeatPumps.com.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Marge Regan, Jim Browdy. 3-time Tony Award winner Patti LuPone, first person to play Evita on Broadway. She joins us on Zoom tomorrow and live in Friday, at the library, and in person on Friday. 4 performers from essentially the Bob Dylan musical Girl from the North Country gotten rave reviews in New York City. That's for Live Music Friday. They'll perform. So it's the middle of the week, the promise of a weekend, sort of on the horizon. We want to stir the pot with a scenario from the personal finance section of the Washington Post. Here's the deal. You graciously accept an invitation to a friend's dinner party hosted at their place. You were planning on bringing some sort of dessert and a bottle of wine because you were raised right. But when the plates are cleared, you find out your friend asked you for cash, charging you for the dinner that they invited you to. So we want to know, would you dine and dash at that point? What's the dinner party etiquette? A potluck is a whole different thing. That's a potluck. We all know how that works. But is it ever okay to just ask for cash for dinner you made for somebody else and invited them to, especially if you just spring it on them at some point during the meal? The number's 877-301-8970. Is it ever okay, Mark? I'm not, by the way, if you're 20 years old and you're like a starving college kid and I don't have a problem with that. For people beyond that phase, is it ever okay to spring on them in the middle or at the end of the meal? By the way, that'll be $37 for the ingredients for your two dinners.
It is never okay. I'm with Michelle Singletary, great columnist. She writes the Washington Post. She also has a column that runs in the Globe as well. Never. It's not even okay if you're a college kid. You shouldn't be, celebrating anything and inviting people. When you're giving them a beer when they come in the door, a glass of wine, maybe in the middle of the entree, or maybe you wait till dessert.
It's okay if you tell them in advance, because they can say, no, I'm not coming,
you
right?
can say, hey, listen, you know what? I'd like to have everybody over for dinner. I can't quite swing this myself.
Right, in which case you say, maybe I'm not coming.
Yeah, or you say, or if you don't want to do a potluck, you're going to do takeout, say, can people pitch in for some takeout? And then, I can say, we're all going to get Thai food and let's all pitch in. But to invite people over to your house for dinner and then tell them midway through the meal, get out your checkbook.
Ante up. What if you have a credit card reader in your kitchen? Is that bad for her? 877.
I can't even believe people do this.
I totally can. 877. And by the way, I bet you a lot of people are totally fine with this. Maybe in a small group of friends. Anyone ever done this, by the way? You ever charged anybody to come to dinner? Everybody here said yes.
Their head no.
Okay,
they're
they're
shaking
saying
their head
no.
no,
I'm kidding.
actually.
I mean, I can't imagine, but apparently it's a real thing, or the Washington Post would not have addressed it. 877-301-8970. You know what Aiden taught us this morning, our colleague?
Oh, about Sweden.
In Sweden, when you invite people over as guests, guess what you do not give them at all? Food. It is not expected that when guests come to your house, you'll feed them. I mean, how ridiculous. You invite them over at 6 o'clock on a Saturday night, and you don't feed the damn people? What was that thing called? Hygge? Remember we talked about that thing? Actually, Andrew was here. Hygge is that thing where you relax and I guess don't eat or something or whatever it was.
You can invite people over for drinks, but you at least throw out some peanuts.
No
or
drinks,
something.
no food.
No drinks.
That's the Swedish way in any case. 877-301-8970. What?
I just want to tell you, I saw this earlier today, but I didn't want to read it. But now that's up on the screen from our staff, that a texter says you look much better without your sweat jacket on, Jim.
Yeah, can I tell you, this is enough.
I've
gotten text this morning. Is why you wearing the same shirt you wore yesterday? Well, let me explain to you why. Because I have 2 of the same shirt. That one's in the laundry. This is a new one.
Yeah.
God.
I mean, your sartorial style is displeasing.
They don't care whether democracy is going to end in November. All they care about is whether I'm wearing my sweat jacket.
Sometimes you do look a little
seedy. Thank you. Thank you.
Like you just rolled out of bed.
By the way,
okay.
I wasn't going to say, it's the end of the show. I'm asking people to make a donation so I can buy a new sweat jacket. 877-301-8970. Would you ever pay? And even if they gave you notice, if they said, you're coming over, your part of the dinner is going to cost $37. Can I get the cash wherever? You can Venmo it to me when you walk in the door.
Brandon in Auburn, what do you think?
Hey, Brandon.
You got to be kidding me, right?
Exactly.
No, we're not.
That's what I said.
What do you think?
So, if you want to lose friends, absolutely, 100%. But I mean, I like to entertain in my house. I like to cook. It's one of my passions. And did I ever think or let it cross my mind that, hey, you know what, I'm going to make some money on my friends? Absolutely not. I think it's petty. I think it's ridiculous. and I think it's a cry for help. All right? I know quite a few good psychologists that would be happy to intervene on this conversation, but other than that, no, not at all.
You're the guy we were looking for to lead this off, Brandon. You did it beautifully. Thank you for your call. We appreciate it.
And as Singletary points out, because this did happen, this is a story
I know
that she
it's
relayed
real.
in her column. You know, oftentimes if you get invited to somebody's house, they say, oh, what can I bring?
Right.
And usually say, well, I can bring an hors d'oeuvre, or I can bring some wine, or I can bring dessert or something. That's usually
Bring cash.
how it works. Just say bring cash, or at least that would be better than springing
Right.
on them midway through the meal. Russell from Quincy, what do you think, Russell?
Hello, Russell.
Hi, guys. First of all, it's appalling, but
Thank you.
this actually happened to me by proxy. I invited good friends of mine over for dinner and a lady who I met through them who I was kind of interested in. So rather than cooking, where if you know you cook, you don't get any chance to socialize yourself, I thought I'll order Indian takeout from a great restaurant. When my guests arrived, I dispatched one of their kids to pick it up. I gave them the money to get it. We had a wonderful night, but the next morning I get a Venmo for the full amount. My friend, the matriarch of the family, had done a whip around from everybody who attended, collecting the money, including from the lady I was interested in, who the poor lady got invited to my house and then got a bill the next morning. So I am horrified by it, but it actually happened to me by accident.
Okay, Russell, how'd it go with the woman you were interested in? Did that work out?
No, it didn't, sadly. So still available. And, by the way, a long-time listener, many times tried to call, usually to tell you to just get a room.
Russell, thank you for your call. We appreciate it. By the way, an anonymous texter says, Jim, they also don't eat dinner at 6 in Sweden, more like 9. So what does that mean? Does that mean it's okay because you've already eaten?
I guess you're.
Or does it mean it's 9 o'clock and you're really going to be in deep whatever?
The Swedes must be really hungry while they're visiting all their friends to socialize.
877-301-8970 is the number. The question posed by the great Michelle Singletary in her column, I should have mentioned her, I'm glad you did at the top, is you invite people over to dinner and you expect them and ask them to pay for their share of the meal. That's bad enough. The thing that is worse than asking in general is asking once they're there and have started eating when they're a captive audience. That is just...
I mean, she says it's kind of like turning a dinner party into a fundraiser. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's a good expression.
It's not a good way to do it.
Or as Brandon said, it's a cry for help. I think it is. It is a cry.
It's a cry for help.
That's a pretty
but as
good
Russell
line.
said, one of the things, that's why, when I used to do dinner parties, which I don't anymore, I always used to make prune chicken, Jim, because you could do it right in advance. You wouldn't have to worry about cooking while the guests were there. It made it much easier.
Can I just say one thing? I mock Marjorie's cooking skills because they are mockable.
Yes,
but let
they
me just say, I mean this sincerely. Your prune chicken is
Prune
no
chicken.
joke at the end.
Yep.
What's it called? What's the real name for that?
Chicken Marrakesh or Mirabella.
No, Mirabella.
Mirabella.
It is fabulous.
Yeah, it's in that Silver Palette cookbook,
It is really,
which is
really
old
good,
by
yeah.
now. Liz from Charlestown, what do you think, Liz?
Hey, Liz.
Well, I have friends that bought a second house in Western Mass.
Yep.
And they often host a group of us every weekend, most weekends in the summer. And after the weekend, they'll send a Venmo or a email to everybody with how much money they spent, and we all send back what we feel like we should contribute.
Well, but
Wow.
Liz, wait. Before you continue, and then I want you to continue. You understood before you go visit them and eat with them and stay with them that there's a bill at the end of the thing, right? You knew in advance and you chose No?
It's not necessarily disclosed. Like, we bring out, we contribute, but then we'll get an email that just says, if it's a particularly busy weekend, they'll just say, I spent this much money, and if you guys feel like sending some money back to us, that'd be great, because they host all the time.
And you're okay with that?
I am, yeah, because I can't host all the time.
Liz, maybe they're
And
sick
it
of
gives them somewhere to
hosting,
go.
and they hope that if they
No, they
send you
love
the...
it.
Oh, they do love it,
No.
okay.
They love it, and we all go out there and pitch in and help. It's a fixer-upper, so we help with the house and do projects. It's a very communal thing.
So what are you saying?
So
You
wait a
help
minute.
with the house, you eat dinner. What do you contribute to the college fund for these kids too? I mean,
No, there's no kids.
oh, there are no kids. So okay.
Just visiting kids.
Well, you're
So
a
we
better
all help each other.
You're a better person than I. I mean, you also seem to have a great attitude in your voice, which I
think
admire.
if you're helping with the house, the fixer-upper,
They should pay you.
Yeah, it should be the other way around, I think, really. But, you think, thank you for the call, Liz. You think if you go to somebody's house for the weekend, you're going to pay for their meals, right? You're going to take them out to dinner or pay for their takeout if you're visiting somebody for the weekend, right?
Here's an alternative, and we should have asked Liz about this. An anonymous texter said, at the end of the dinner, when this person hosts one of these meals, I turn around my screen for a tip starting at a minimum of 20%. That's sort of how I feel. I mean, obviously, that's sort of how I feel about this thing, even though Liz seemed to be totally fine with it.
So here's Michelle Singletary. But Michelle, you might consider surely people with limited means, young adults, shouldn't have to forego celebrating a momentous occasion because they can't afford to treat everyone. Here's what Michelle says. Surely you jest. That's what she says.
Let's go
Jessica from Foxborough, thank you for calling.
Hey, Jessica.
Oh, hi there. The scenario you described reminded me of a time I visited New York City on a budget in my 20s. I ordered a salad at a restaurant with friends. I was very careful with the exact dollar amount I chose to order. And people at the table ordered more generously, including alcohol. And at the end of the meal, everybody threw their credit cards in to split.
Yeah.
I was totally caught off guard. I assumed I'd be paying just for myself, and I ended up paying way over my share. I sucked it up at the time, but since that time, I've thought, how could I have handled that differently on the spot? What's a fair protocol there? Thankfully, I'm now in a position where that'd be less of an issue, but the scenario you described did remind me of that particular anecdote from there.
By the way, we had a discussion about that very topic about a month ago on Who's the A-Hole Day, Thursday afternoon.
A lot of people are complaining that we're doing Who's the A-Hole Day on Wednesday instead of Thursday.
We're doing it again tomorrow. I don't know if this is Who's the... Jessica, you know what a lot of people do in settings like that? Because I think this came up during that discussion. Since drinks are always generally the most expensive part of the meal, they get 2 checks. Sort of like we do when we're on an expense account thing, because we don't get reimbursed for drinks. A drink check that's split amongst those who drink, and a food check split amongst the rest. That's a lot more equitable, don't you think?
I say cheers to that.
Cheers to that. Thank you, Jessica, for your call and story.
Al from Winchester wants to know if guests should ask for an itemized list of the cost, what the food was, what the booze was.
This is better. Andrew from Gloucester. How about also charging for parking? Better yet, put a boot on their wheel till they pay. That's one, those Colorado boots where you can't drive your car. Are they Colorado boots? I think that's what they're called.
Yeah.
Jessica, thank you.
A lot of people are asking if they need to leave a tip as well.
But by the way, this is exactly how I feel about it. It's sort of like, why not bill for parking and everything else kind of thing? It's just wrong.
Max from Shrewsbury said, your first caller had it right. This person must be seeing a whole team of psychiatrists.
Yeah, but Liz sounded totally normal and fine, didn't she? And she was perfectly fine with it. So let me ask you this question. If you like somebody and they gave you advance notice, we agree the critical issue here is not just asking for the money, but asking for the money sort of surprise when it's too late to say no. If someone said to you, not someone who's a really close friend, somebody who you sort of like and were sort of looking forward to going to the thing, and they said, Marjorie, I really hope you're coming Saturday night. And by the way, we're splitting the thing up between all the couples that are coming. Would you go?
Well, I would think that was weird, because I think if you didn't have much money, but you wanted to get together with your friends, what you'd say is, hey, it'd be really fun to see you guys come over and have some dinner, but I'm really kind of tight. Can we do a potluck?
Potluck.
Everybody brings something, and then I won't have to bring everything, and bring your own bottle of booze if you drink, and that's it.
Callie just texted, and our colleague, and her solution, I didn't want to say this because I'd seem like a misanthrope, but she's doing it for me. What's Callie say?
She says, just don't invite people over.
Why is this not the simplest of solutions? By the way, 4 exclamation marks, so she really means it. 877-301-8970.
Michelle from Rhode Island, thank you for calling.
Hi, Michelle.
Hi, I'm just calling to say when I invite people over, I think about who I'm inviting over and what they can lend to the conversation and almost the ambiance of the experience. And that's a gift that those people are giving to me and to my guests. I'm sure if Jim or Marjorie were invited to a party, everyone would want to come because they're interesting.
They
work in an interesting field.
Well, maybe one of us. I'm not sure both of us. But go ahead, Michelle. Marjorie gets invited to a lot of places. Go ahead, what?
I don't, actually. No one ever invites me anywhere.
Well, I was trying to be nice.
I don't know why.
Go ahead, Michelle. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, that's okay, but I at least find you interesting, both of you.
Thank you.
But I think it's but I think it's something that, it goes both ways. When you give at a party, that is, I would say, payment enough. Are you kidding?
Well, you're a good person, Michelle, I have to say. You're a fine soul. And thank you for your call. An anonymous texter says, do you still have to pay if you cancel your reservation at your friend's house? But it is like a restaurant transaction kind of thing.
Listen to this. This isn't exactly on topic, but I like it. Whenever I invite my in-laws over, I know well in advance it's going to be a freeloader festival, and I'm all right with that because I invited them. The most they've ever brought with them was a bag of M&Ms. Just one time.
Well, Callie's right. Don't invite him back. By the way, do you ever, what just occurred to me? I think earlier in life.
It's a Denver boot, Jim.
Do you ever, Denver, I'm
says,
sorry.
yeah.
Well, it's in Colorado. Do you ever offer money to somebody?
No.
Yeah.
No.
I think way back once or something I can't remember the maybe it's for, I don't know, kids. I don't know what it was. In any case, maybe I'm not even right. We only have time for one more quick one, and it's you, Stephanie in New Hampshire. Hi, Stephanie.
Hi. There's nothing wrong with being a little shabby or seedy.
Thank you. It's the nicest compliment I've ever gotten. Go ahead. Go ahead. What?
Okay. But I've gone to Sweden numerous times, and I never have had a problem getting food served to me.
Oh.
Though I have to say they're my relatives, so maybe they feel obligated.
Maybe.
But when you're visiting other people, you do tend to go in the afternoon, and they give you cookies and cake.
Oh.
It's a big tradition. So you can get that 3 or 4 times in one day.
Oh.
And the coffee is something you could stick a stick in and it stands straight up.
I love that. So essentially you can visit a serial number of families and get like tons of cake and cookies and coffee.
Right. It's right. It is. It's huge.
Hook it to
I
you.
have always cooked meals.
You what?
Right. But I've always cooked meals for them. And so I'm thinking maybe they don't really do a lot of food. They just serve me because I'm staying with them.
That's
could be.
But I always have a dinner party, and it's a big thing to have a dinner party.
Got it.
Stephanie, we are out of time.
Thank you for your
very much
Swedish experience.
For the call.
Thank you.
One of the texters says they charged you, Jim, because they charge you double because you know you're going to ask for some Tupperware to take food home, and that, of course, is true. Okay.
This is the woman who has been eyeing the mashed potatoes from Ty McCarthy
and I'm
since
going to
he
get them
left.
before I go home. Okay, thank you very much for listening to another edition of Boston Public Radio. You can keep up with us 24/7.
Marguerite,
by
don't
way of our
applaud.
podcast.
Marguerite, don't applaud for yourself.
I like to applaud for myself, Jim. Tune in tomorrow for Boston Globe business columnist Shirley Leung, former Suffolk County Sheriff Andrew Cabral, Embrace Boston's Amari Paris Jeffries, our food policy analyst Corby Cummer, and former Senator / NBA Hall of Famer of the New York Knicks, Bill Bradley, on his new documentary on Max.
Did you watch it yet?
Yes,
it is spectacular.
Really, it gives you hope and very
It really
inspiring.
does. It's really inspirational.
We want to thank our crew, Zoe Matthews, Aidan Conlon, Cole Garcia, Hannah Loss, our engineer John the Claw Parker, our executive producer Jane Bologna, special BPL help today with Matthew Glover, Maddie Geyer, Sandra Lopez Burke, Carly Corcoran, and Isabella Caron, as well as the